Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1: The Boy in Shackles. September 1991, 9 London Cross East Station. Harry Potter was happily pushing his luggage, looking for the platform 3 and 4 shown on his ticket point, but no matter how he asked, the station manager always claimed that the platform did not exist. Just when he was at a loss, the luggage cart he was pushing seemed to hit something. Be careful, kid. A scolding came. Harry looked up quickly and saw two adult men in long trench coats and a blonde boy between them. The grown man glared at Harry while the teenager smiled and gently leaned over to pat his soiled pants. "I'm sorry." Harry lowered his head quickly and saw an iron chain. He followed the chain all the way up. Only then did he realize that the blonde boy in front of him had shackles on his hands, legs and even neck. Heavy iron chains tied up his entire body. Seeing this scene, Harry couldn't help but take a few steps back in fear. The blonde boy looked at him and smiled, then spread his hands and pointed to the wall behind him and said, "I think you should look for that place. Go there bravely and you will get what you want." After saying that, he, escorted by two men and windbreakers, walked straight through the wall and disappeared without a trace. Outside the wall, Harry still looked confused, while inside the wall, he was under the surprised gaze of many children. The blonde boy was escorted to the very end of the train, and two men roughly stuffed him into the carriage. Then he waited nervously outside the car. Inside the car, a short and fat middle-aged man had been waiting there for a long time. The moment he saw the young man, he quickly asked him to sit down, and at the same time, tremblingly poured a glass of sherry for him and himself. "Mr. Carroll, you must have had a hard journey. Have a glass of sherry to warm yourself up." The middle-aged man raised his glass, trying to get closer. Unexpectedly, the other party didn't even raise his eyelids, but just sat quietly on the sofa beside him. This made the middle-aged man extremely embarrassed. He, Cornelius Fudge, the current Minister of Magic, was known as the top leader of the entire British wizarding world. No one had ever been so disrespectful to him before, and he had no choice but to sit back at the desk. He flipped open the thick file and read in the calmest tone possible, "Karl Hohenzollern, German and American citizen, you have been accused by the United Wizarding Nations of long-term illegal trading in magical creatures. The French Ministry of Magic accused you of being involved with a witch party in the 1940s. More importantly, this is the crime you committed in the Muggle world. You organized a mafia-like organization in New York State for a long time. Illegal drug smuggling, illegal firearms smuggling, and human trafficking. The International Police's red notice is always ranked in the top 10. Don't you have anything to explain?" "No," you continue. Carol, who was sitting on the sofa, smiled faintly and stretched out his hand to signal the other party to continue. His perfect etiquette and handsome appearance always give people a polite feeling. But Mr. Cornelius Fudge, who was looking through the files, was very clear about the young man in front of him. He is definitely not as harmless as he appears. What he has done behind the scenes is much more terrifying than the mysterious man before. So he plucked up his courage, knocked on the table with his hand and spoke loudly. "No, you must give an explanation for today's conversation. It will be the most important basis for whether you can enter Hogwarts. I must be responsible for my duties." "Okay, if you insist." Carol looked at Mr. Kennelly opposite him calmly, picked up the sherry beside him, and said calmly while shaking it, "First of all, let me be clear that I do not admit any of the charges, such as the first one. I have been illegally trading in magical creatures for a long time. The land is mine, as are the animals and trees on it. According to German law, it belongs to me. How can it be considered illegal for me to sell my personal property? Secondly, Aunt Rosier is my elder relative. I don't know her past or what happened to her. I have no interest in her past. Finally, the accusations against the US government are nonsense. They don't have any evidence. I run a company in the US and operate legally. My accounting and accounts are sufficient to prove it all." "What did you say?" You smuggled drugs and trapped hundreds of thousands of Americans. They even smuggled arms into war-torn areas, causing those muggles to kill each other. Cornelius couldn't help but roar. Carol, who was interrupted, just smiled faintly at the accusation of the middle-aged man. How can you say that? You are now defaming us for selling opioids in our company. There are prescriptions from prescribing physicians as evidence, and this is completely legal under current US law. As for those drug addictions, the side effects are clearly stated on the drug packaging. Those people have poor self-control. What does that have to do with me? As for the arms smuggling, I cannot admit it even more. My shipping company's cargo ship was hijacked in the Persian Gulf, and I even called the police. Interpol was unable to recover my losses, but now they are framing me. How can this be justified? Silence. Faced with the boy's sophistry, Cornelius could only choose to remain silent, just as the other party said point. Even though there was such a thick pile of information in front of him, there was no actual evidence in it point. All the documents had words like inference and possibility written in red and large letters. The reason why the other party is sitting here now is simply because he was arrested for misusing magic in the Muggle world point, and all signs indicate that the other party may have done this on purpose point. In response to this, he could only sigh deeply and look at Carol with his small eyes. You're going to hell, Mr. Care. Oh, really? Hearing this, Karl smiled slightly, shaking his wine glass, and continued. You all think I'm a sinner, but have you ever thought about the homeless people on the streets of New York? And for veterans who come home with severe PTSD, that little tube of painkiller, it may be the only comfort he can get in the world. As for the arms, Karl slowly stood up and drank the sherry in his hand. That is the last and best gift for people in despair who are rebelling against world hegemony. After saying this, he opened his hands, pointed around, and smiled calmly. Look at the surroundings. How magnificent and disgusting it is. You don't have to see me off, Minister. I'm already in hell. I'm already there. Chapter 2 Useless System. Well, since you don't want to say anything more, I will have to record and report what you said from time to time. Mr. Cornelius Fudge, who had long been speechless, could only slam his notebook shut point. He looked at the young man helplessly, but still threatened him without giving up. But based on my experience, submitting such testimony will never lead to any good results. Please do as you wish. Carol still looked indifferent, but when the other party just stood up and prepared to leave point, he said calmly, I heard that you also used your savings to buy the Wizard Cornucopia Financial Fund, which has just appeared a short time ago. Investment is risky. If the market crashes tomorrow, you'll lose everything you've invested. These words made Cornelius Fudge stand there for a moment. He turned his head mechanically to look at Karl, his voice trembling. What do you want to say? I didn't say anything. Karl spread his hands calmly. I just emphasized the facts. As for the testimony, you can write it however you want. I think it should be easy for Britain, a country with a centuries-old tradition of civil service, to find a few people who are good at rhetoric. As for the rise or fall of the fund tomorrow, that's your business, Mr. Cornelius Fudge. I didn't say anything. I am oblivious. After that, he sat on the sofa again without saying a word, and the whole car fell into a strange silence. Exactly 5 minutes later, Mr. Cornelius Fudge walked out of the carriage with a strange look on his face. A moment later, the two men in long windbreakers entered the workshop with an angry look on his face. He held the magic wand and tapped lightly on the shackles on Karl. Soon the shackles were removed, and the heavy chains fell to the floor with a dull sound. Karl, who regained his freedom, stretched himself, moved his wrists, and then reached out to take the item handed to him by the other party. Those were his personal belongings that were confiscated when he was arrested. He carefully flipped through them. For example, the numbers in your wallet, your expensive watch, or even the number of cigarettes in your pack, all of which you would deliberately pour out and count. This behavior was undoubtedly a humiliation to the two Auras, and one of them said angrily, you will be punished, and your crimes will be exposed to the sun one day. Justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Carol was totally dismissive of this. After putting away all his personal belongings, He shrugged and pointed to the door of the carriage. I think there is no need for the two elites to go back to school. If possible, can you give me some private space now? As soon as he finished speaking, the two auras turned around and left, and he was the only one left in the carriage point until this time. He sat alone on the sofa, muttering to himself, okay, dog system, it's time to tell me what you are useful for. As a person who has lived in an orphanage since childhood, Karl Hohenzollern is undoubtedly a time traveler. As a time traveler, he should have had his own plug-in early on point. Thus, he drove on the golden finger and headed for the peak of his life point. But with so many time travelers, some accidents are bound to happen. After spending 6 nightmarish years in the orphanage point, I finally escaped from that hellhole with the help of my special abilities and the connections I had accumulated in the orphanage point. He finally made a name for himself in the United States, and in just 10 years, he had become a well-known underworld godfather in New York State point. His original plan was to exploit the white world through capitalism, while relying on his own special abilities to lead the black world point. Finally, 20 years later, he followed the example of another German-American predecessor and ran for president of the United States point, taking advantage of the divisions in American society. We seek development space for our motherland far away on the other side of the ocean point. Yes, he is such a person. Although he is wearing Western clothes, his heart is still Chinese point. But accidents happen. Just when he was enjoying his life in New York, Aunt Rachel suddenly found him, telling himself that he was actually a wizard. He suddenly realized that this world was different from what he had originally imagined. Point. It was also at that time that he finally awakened his system, the ultimate villain system. But this time it was not him who was surprised, but the system point, because the matching direction of the system refers specifically to the magical world point. But considering what Karl has done in the past 10 years, he has far exceeded the level of villain required by the magical world point. In short, it was a bit too bad, and I found myself not only late, but also completely useless. He started to play badly and torment Karl, and finally experienced a series of unpleasant things. The two sides finally reached an agreement. After the other party promised to give him what he wanted most, Karl deliberately exposed a flaw and was arrested by British auras. Use this as an opportunity to enter Hogwarts, while the system makes compromises based on what Cole really wants. Congratulations to the host for successfully entering the magic world and escaping punishment with clever words. The following novice rewards are now given. Memory Palace. From Sherlock Holmes, your brain is now a supercomputer that can process countless complex data. 1 magical animal egg, and a complete set of hatching equipment. And Galleons. Stop, I'm not short of money. Just as the system was about to continue talking about the reward, Karl interrupted him ruthlessly point, and put forward their own requirements. Is there something like a storage ring, or something more powerful? As soon as the words were spoken, the interrupted system could only express helplessly, yes, it is, but host, you have just completed your first mission and you are already asking for a high-level reward. Isn't that a bit too much? You are making it very difficult for me. It's difficult. Karl took a cigarette out of the box, put it casually in his mouth, and then watched his hands suddenly rise up. He overturned the small wooden table next to the sofa. Then, I think we should just not do it. The wine bottle on the small wooden table fell to the ground and shattered in an instant. The sound of broken glass was extremely harsh. Perhaps what he didn't expect was that the system in his mind suddenly spoke again. As soon as he entered the school, he destroyed school items, fully demonstrating his rebellious potential as a villain. He will be awarded 10 villain points. Add 90 points as a novice bonus, a total of 100 points, which can be exchanged for a ring. 5 cubic meters of space. Whether to exchange. Exchange. Hearing the system's timely response, he did not hesitate for a moment and directly asked for the exchange. Okay, all rewards are being distributed. I hope the host will continue to work hard, become bigger and stronger, and create more glory. Soon there appeared a giant flaming egg, a set of strange equipment, and a ring engraved with the Hohenzollern family emblem. It appeared out of thin air on the desk beside him. Karl walked over and put the ring on his hand. At the same time, he put the giant egg and the equipment into the ring, then sat quietly on the sofa, Feeling the changes in his brain point at this moment, a huge memory palace rose up in his mind, with countless memories classified and placed everywhere. Walking in the palace, Karl felt both novelty and uncontrollable excitement. He walked slowly inside, and at the deepest part of this memory palace, a transparent crystal tower rose from the ground. The top of the tower is dark. That is the highest reward promised by the system, a kind of holy grail wishing device similar to the animation Fate. Villain points can be used to fulfill any wish of people, but each activation will consume at least 1,000 million villain points. Looking at his pitiful lack of points, Karl couldn't help but shake his head. It seemed that he still had a long way to go. And just as he was about to leave his memory palace, the closed door of the carriage was knocked from outside, and a gloomy voice was heard at the same time. Karl Hohenzollern, please open the door. I'm Professor Snape, the head of Slytherin House. Chapter 3, Robbery of Gringotts. Without waiting too long, the carriage door opened automatically, and Professor Snape stood outside the carriage. Looking at the carriage door that opened automatically, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly hidden. He strode into the carriage and saw a young man sitting upright on a chair behind the desk, looking him up and down. "Ah, you trying to show off your power to me, Mr. Karl? Or do you want to sit down and introduce yourself to the professor?" Snape looked at Karl behind him, frowned and said with some displeasure, "How could that be?" In response, Karl spread his hands innocently, quickly stood up, and walked out from behind the desk, and came in front of Professor Snape. After packing up, he introduced himself respectfully. "Karl Hohenzollern, born in America, of German descent." As he said this, he stretched out his right hand with a smile, but it was obvious that his previous action made the professor very unhappy. "You should have done this from the beginning, instead of sitting on top of it and having your professor standing there waiting for you," Snape said unhappily, turned around and prepared to leave. Looking at the other person's back, Karl smiled indifferently. He has always had a good impression of this pure, loyal and talented genius. However, it was inevitable to have some complaints about the other party's outfit that looked like a black bat and his greasy hair that looked like it hadn't been washed for 200 years. So he obediently followed Professor Snape out of the carriage. He didn't care that the other party didn't shake hands with him, but he followed behind him and complained, "If it's okay, I'd like to recommend to you a care package for middle-aged men that our company has specially launched. This includes correcting poor clothing, fixing hairstyles, and covering up facial blemishes." I think it might be. He didn't have time to finish his words, or rather, he didn't have the chance to finish them, as the two of them had just walked out of the station. Snape suddenly grabbed his shoulders, then waved his wand, followed by a flash of silver light and a journey that felt like being squeezed out of a pipe. The two of them suddenly appeared on a street, looking at the cobblestone street under their feet and the countless shops on both sides. Karl knew that this was the legendary CBD of the wizarding world, Diagon Alley, but the surrounding shops were too retro and dilapidated. There weren't many people on the street, so he spoke out of habit. "It seems that this street needs to be renovated. You can see there aren't many customers. That's because today is the first day of school. All the little wizards have already bought all their items. You are the only special customer today, so can we please hurry up and leave right after we finish shopping, Professor?" Snape was quite annoyed by Karl's chattering. At the same time, he took the lead and walked quickly towards a white building in the distance. As he walked, he spoke firmly without looking back. "Go to Gringotts to exchange money first, then buy wands, books, school uniforms and other things, and have an owl send them to Hogwarts. Just follow my steps." With such an unquestionable tone and the retaliatory apparition before, Karl could only say that he was very Snape. He followed the other party obediently. I walked along the long street and stood in front of Gringotts. Compared to the other retro and dilapidated shops in Diagon Alley, Gringotts was undoubtedly the most eye-catching one, with a white building, a shining bronze door, and even two goblins in uniform standing at the door. Karl looked at the two goblins, then looked at Professor Snape beside him, and shook his head. "Professor, you really don't consider the opinion I just made. Judging from the current state, both of these goblins are dressed better than you." After these words were spoken, Snape was silent at first. He thought that the other child was just like other children who came here for the first time. Maybe he was attracted by the surrounding environment, so he stood there in a daze. Maybe he didn't expect this. This guy has been worrying about his taste in clothes since he got into the car. Is what he wears really that bad? Professor Snape, feeling that his soul was humiliated, first glared at Karl and then squeezed out words from between his teeth. Shut up. Then he strode towards the interior of Gringotts, leaving Karl at the door. Shrugged helplessly, but when he was about to step into the building in front of him, a familiar voice sounded in my mind. Congratulations to the host. You have successfully humiliated a professor, and you are awarded 10 villain points. The current points are 10. Comment: he is so bold, right after entering the academy. He is indeed a born bad seed. Listening to the system's groundless accusations, he certainly couldn't admit that he was doing this for the other party's sake, so how could it be considered a humiliation? So he chose to completely ignore such slander and strode into Gringotts. After passing through the first door, Professor Snape was waiting at the second door, and he wanted to do his duty. Explained the inscription on the door to the freshman. But when Carol walked in, he looked at the other person's angelic smile. As if nothing had happened, he pushed the door open with a dark face and walked in. Karl, who was ignored, chose to ignore these details and strode through the door and into the marble hall. Inside the hall, there were about 100 goblins sitting on high stools behind the counter, some weighing coins on scales, some were examining the gems with magnifying glasses, while more were recording accounts. Watching them busy at work, Cole was reminded of many famous oil paintings, in which the moneylenders and tax collectors often looked so shrewd. As for the qualities of these fairies and what kind of people in real life they represent, it is clear enough when I think of the book The Chameleon that I learned in middle school in my previous life. There are always some people in the world who are shrewd, greedy, and despicable, and they rebel from time to time. They attempted to turn the land where they were staying into their own property, so Karl could be said to have no good feelings towards these goblins at all. He even felt that the air in the hall was so foul that it made him feel sick, so he very impolitely took out a perfumed handkerchief from his bosom. Covering his nose, he followed Professor Snape's footsteps and came to a counter on the far right. This is a new wizard who needs to be exchanged for gold galleons, Professor. Snape also seemed to have a favorable impression of these goblins. He just sat next to the counter and kept urging them. The goblin behind the counter didn't even raise his head. Today is the first day of school, Professor. I don't think there are any little wizards who need to exchange gold galleons. You should know that human currency is useless to us. This kind of exchange is a loss-making business for us, so please allow me to refuse. What? I have a document from the Ministry of Magic here. You can't. Professor Snape frowned and took out a piece of paper with words written on it. He slammed the table in front of the counter angrily. The goblin behind the counter took the paper and examined it carefully. Then he handed it back intact. It only states that he can go to Hogwarts to study, but it does not indicate that he is a freshman. What's even more bizarre is that the list of freshmen admitted by Hogwarts that we received is not included. There is no such name as Karl Hohenzollern. So please allow me to refuse. After being rejected repeatedly by this inhuman thing, Karl, who had been sitting nearby, walked to the counter with a smile. He pushed Professor Snape away and signaled him with his eyes to wait beside him. Then suddenly, a hand jumped up like lightning and instantly grabbed the goblin's throat. She pressed the other person's face against the glass on the counter beside her, then stared into the other person's eyes with her beautiful blue eyes and spoke. You Alright, Mr. Goblin. I'm indeed not a freshman at Hogwarts, but a criminal who is about to serve his sentence there. Chapter 4. Are your gold galleons ripe? And the moment he took action, that familiar voice immediately rang in his mind. Well done, host. As a real villain, how can you pay for it yourself? I don't even pay for watermelon in the south of the city. Issue the task. Can you keep these gold galleons? Use violence to plunder the property of no less than 500 gold galleons from this greedy guy. The more you have, the richer the reward. The penalty for mission failure is that the important parts will be shortened by 1 centimeter. Just as he was looking at the system's task and shaking his head, a transparent and invisible light shield appeared. He cut himself and the goblin off from the outside world, and even Professor Snape standing next to him stood there in a daze, as if time had stopped. Seeing this, Karl knew without thinking that it was the system that was causing trouble, and at the same time he admired the power of the system. I started to have some interest in the reward the other party mentioned, and it was also for my own future happiness. He simply exerted force with his wrist, gripped the other person's throat tightly, and said with a smile on his face, "So, please don't treat me as your customer. My current behavior can educate you. In the Muggle world, this is generally called robbery. Give me 10,000 gold galleons right now." The goblin at the counter, whose throat was tightly pinched by Karl, had his ugly face flushed red due to congestion. It was like a duck with its throat pinched, gasping for breath and speaking hoarsely. "You will regret this. No one can take a gold coin from Gringotts that does not belong to him. I advise you to let it go immediately, otherwise you will spend the rest of your life in Azkaban, in misery." Seeing that the other party not only refused to compromise with him, but even dared to threaten him, Karl grabbed the other party's throat. He couldn't help but increase his strength a bit, and at the same time, the voice of the system in his mind sounded again. "How dare you ignore the threat of the future Supreme Dark Lord? The other party is obviously ungrateful. In order to strengthen the deterrence, the host has automatically obtained Avalon Soul, a master level mastery of the spell, and can use this spell without a wand." Hearing this, Karl's cheeks twitched wildly, and he kept complaining in his heart, "Hey, can we be reasonable? If he doesn't give you money, you're going to kill him. Can we just calm down first? Have a good talk with the other party? We are villains, not murderers." Although he thought so in his mind, in reality, he slammed the other person hard against the glass of the counter. The other person grimaced in pain, and his ugly face became even uglier, while he stretched out his fingers to make a pistol gesture. A green light with a breath of death began to gather at the top of the finger. "I'll only give you 10 seconds. If I don't see the money after 10 seconds, I'll send you to meet your ancestors." After saying that, he ignored the threats and pleas from the goblin opposite him and started counting down. 109,732. Hey, your calculation is wrong." The goblin at the counter was completely frightened, watching the other party's special arithmetic method. When the green light on the other person's finger became increasingly stronger and the other person finally counted to 2, his psychological defenses completely collapsed. He raised his hands and shouted loudly, "Don't count anymore. I'll give you as much as you want. Please, put me down, and I will give you galleons immediately. Do you think I'm a fool?" Looking at the funny appearance of this goblin, Karl curled his lips in disdain. "Use magic to write a contract of exchange, sign your real name, and finally drip your blood." As he spoke, he moved his thumb lightly and used his clever strength to break a brittle bone next to the opponent's neck spine. The severe pain made the fairy beg continuously. At the same time, the magic feather pen beside it began to write quickly on a piece of white paper. In less than a moment, a remittance contract was completed, and finally under Karl's supervision. The fairy personally used his left hand, the only hand that could still move, to write down the specific amount of the remittance, signed his real name, and cut his finger at the same time. Put a drop of blood on that name. Only after all the operations were completed did Karl let go of his left hand that was pinching the other person's neck. At the same time, the invisible barrier disappeared without a trace. Professor Snape, who was standing by, looked at Karl with strange eyes, as if he had just woken up from a dream. Karl shrugged with a smile, then kindly used his left hand to straighten the elf's messed up collar. Then he picked up the handkerchief, wiped his hands, and threw it aside casually. Finally, he picked up the remittance contract in front of the counter, waved it in front of Professor Snape, and spoke in a praising tone. "I didn't expect the staff here to be so considerate and generous. After knowing my past, he forcefully stuffed this piece of paper into my hand. I think this piece of paper should be able to solve our current troubles." After Saying this, he handed the paper back to the counter like a normal customer, waiting for the other party to give him the money. Soon, under the stunned gaze of the goblins, the goblin with an injured shoulder came over pushing a small mountain of gold in a cart. He said with a forced smile, "Sir, according to the agreement, your galleons are all here, but due to the large number, I suggest you open a vault in Gringotts. This way you can enjoy our excellent service. In the entire wizarding world, Gringotts is the safest place except for Hogwarts." Karl didn't believe a word of this, and he knew very well what the other party was thinking. So he just waved his hand lightly, and the mountain of gold coins was put into the ring on the little finger of his left hand. This action undoubtedly attracted the attention of the whole audience, and other fairies cast greedy eyes on Karl's ring. The injured goblin looked as if he had eaten a fly. He originally thought that the other party was totally ignorant and could not take away so many gold coins, so he just wanted these gold coins to return to his hands. "I have 10,000 ways to make up for my losses today, but now it seems that the other party is too shrewd. I have to fill this hole of 10,000 gold galleons myself." No matter what, it didn't give up and couldn't help but want to make amends. "Sir, can't you count the money?" "No. I believe in the credibility of Gringotts, and if the quantity is not enough, I will come back to you." Karl stood up slightly and looked at the other person with a smile, but his angelic smile made the other person tremble constantly. Seeing that the other party might die of a stroke in front of him due to the huge loss, he was unwilling to stay any longer. Pulling Professor Snape, who was still in a daze, he strode out of the door of Gringotts. "As soon as I walked out the door, the familiar voice sounded in my mind. Nice numbers. You are worse than I thought. The reward has been issued. The purple quality reward is Advanced Black Magic Encyclopedia. Study this book. You will easily master all the black magic in the magic world, and use it skillfully. Learn it, young man. You are the only villain." I wiped the system. What a bullshit review. I didn't kill anyone. I just talked to the other party calmly. How can you say that you are bad? It is simply slander. Karl kept complaining in his heart, and just when he was about to complain harshly about his own dog system, Snape's voice sounded in his ears. "What on earth did you just do? Did you rob Gringotts?" Chapter 5 Traditional North American Martial Arts. How can you slander someone's innocence out of thin air? Can taking money be considered robbery? Can a customer's business be considered robbery? Faced with Professor Snape's accusation, Karl certainly could not admit it. While speaking, he even turned his head to look at Professor Snape. Pretending to look pitiful, he asked in a low and slightly hoarse voice, "Professor Snape, did you hate me from the beginning and think that I was born a bad person?" "No, when a handsome and slightly cute 15-year-old boy questioned himself with that look and tone. Snape already realized that asking that question was a very stupid act. He stammered, trying to make it clear that he didn't think so. As a professor, he even felt a long-lost sense of guilt. This feeling was extremely unpleasant, but unfortunately he was clearly not good at comforting people. He was helpless, and after hesitating for a long time, he could only compromise and say, "Let's not discuss this issue. Time is running out. Let's go buy a wand first." After saying this, he strode forward, and Karl followed him silently. So this strange pair walked through Diagon Alley and soon arrived at their destination. Compared with the previous splendor of Gringotts, the shop in front of him could no longer be described as dilapidated. It looked like a complete garbage dump, and the dust on the windowsill had already solidified into dirt. It was impossible to see what was going on inside the store, as there was a wooden sign hanging crookedly above the store. "Olivanders, making wands since 382. Looking at the words above, Karl curled his lips in disdain. People in the magical world don't even have basic knowledge of history, just bragging without thinking. More than 300 years BC, apart from some undeveloped Celtic tribes, you might not even see a monkey on the British Isles. The Romans had not yet arrived, so let alone the concept of magic. It was a big question mark whether civilization even existed. However, as the only arms dealer in the British wizarding world, it is a monopoly business, so it is understandable that they brag and do marketing. Seeing Karl standing there, staring at the shop sign, combined with his behavior in Gringotts, Professor Snape thought he was a germaphobe, so he took out his wand, pointed at the shop in front of him and whispered, Scourgify cleans up. Clang. As soon as the spell was finished, a silver breeze blew out from the top of the wand, trying to take away the dust point, but it was obvious that Professor Snape overestimated the stability of this shop, and that small breeze did not carry any dust point. Instead, it blew the door of the wand shop to the ground, causing large amounts of dust to fly up, and even several pieces of dirt on the windows were shaken off point. As we all know, dirt generally likes to adhere to objects with high oil content. The flying dust then dyed Professor Snape's shiny black hair a delicate silver grey color. So beautiful, Professor. Perfect magic. Perfect hairstyle. I suggest you keep it. When the dust settled, Karl, who witnessed it all, gave his sincere evaluation. Humiliate the professor again. Villain points increase by 10. And his dog system also scored his behavior. It seemed that even the system was happy. Only Professor Snape stood there alone, his face extremely gloomy. Just when the scene was becoming awkward, an old voice broke the silence. That naughty boy, didn't I put up a sign outside prohibiting the use of magic? Don't let me catch you, otherwise. Severus, it turns out to be you. An old man with white hair and beard walked out from behind the gate with a menacing look and started roaring. But when he saw that the other person was Professor Snape, who had become handsome, his face immediately changed into a professional fake smile. As expected of someone who has survived the Voldemort era, his speed in changing his expression is truly extraordinary. Garrick, your shop really needs some repairs, Professor Snape said with a gloomy face, like a crow about to get angry. But Ollivander just smiled. He looked at Karl behind him and asked with some confusion, today should be the first day of school. Why did you bring this young man here? After saying that, he staggered in front of Carol and looked him up and down with his deep blue eyes. What's your name, young man? You don't look like a new wizard. How old are you? 15 or 16, Karl Hohenzollern. Karol introduced himself and took a step back involuntarily. Of course he didn't mean to disrespect the old man. It's just that the old man was too dirty. Hohenzollern, German. This surname is very noble. I guess so, but I grew up in an American orphanage as far as I can remember. Oh, really? Poor kid. But with all due respect, even American dogs don't go there. The two chatted like this, and under the guidance of Ollivander, they slowly walked into the store, and a tape measure automatically flew in front of Karl. Karl actively cooperated with the other party's work, and at the same time he also gained a deeper understanding of the magical world. It seems that this world is not as dreamy as imagined. The people here are the same as most Europeans. They also despise the new country of the United States, and believed that Americans were just a bunch of unsophisticated people who couldn't make it in Europe. However, he was not in the mood to give the other party a modern international history lesson. He just cooperated with the other party's work silently, which is your dominant hand. It's fine either way. Oh, really? That's a difficult question to answer. Ollivander used his magic ruler to measure Karl's entire body and then recorded all the data. He frowned, then turned and left, only to come back soon with a pile of wooden boxes. He put the wooden box aside and spoke helplessly while picking from it. Sorry, kid, it's been a long time since I customized the first one for a 15 or 16-year-old boy, and you are well developed and very strong. Have you received any special training for your wrists and arms? Can you tell me, kid? It will help me choose. What weapons do you usually use? These words immediately aroused the curiosity of Professor Snape, who looked at Karl. Carol shrugged indifferently and said without hesitation, you know, I live in the United States, so I've studied some traditional North American martial arts, and I do use some weapons. 45. M1911917 R15 Act 47. Chapter 6. Difficult One Selection. After saying this, Snape and Ollivander looked at Cole with surprise and dullness in their eyes. What on earth did this kid do before? He's such a dangerous guy. Snape thought to himself, what kind of life has this boy been living before? What a poor little guy. Ollivander thought so again. The two of them had different thoughts in their minds. One of them quietly came behind Carol and stared at the other. I want to get some clues from the changes in the other person's expression. The other one wiped the tears from his eyes again, handed over a wand, and patted the other's shoulder to comfort him. Don't be sad, kid. You are safe now. You don't need those useless things to protect yourself. Ironwood, 9 inches, unicorn hair to the core, for the strong. After listening to the introduction, Karl took the wand in his hand. In fact, he felt a little disdainful in his heart. He always thought that the wooden stick in his hand was just a broken one. It was really not as reliable as his own M1911, and what happened next confirmed his thoughts. Just when he was about to pick up the wand and wave it to test whether this wand was suitable for him, with a cracked sound, the sturdy magic wand broke directly, and the internal circuit of the magic wand seemed to be short-circuited. There was a flash of silver light and sparks, followed by an unpleasant burning smell. How is that possible? No. Lavender screamed and quickly snatched the wand from his hand. After looking it up and down, he turned his head and stared at Carol, his face flushed. What's going on in your heart, kid? What have you been through to feel so hopeless and hateful? As he said this, he handed the wand to Professor Snape and Karl, jumping up and down. It's dead. This wand is completely dead. Not even the unicorn can soothe it. Is that the pain and hatred in your heart, child? Carol frowned, feeling that something was wrong. If he continued like this, his past might be exposed. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but lower his head silently, his shoulders shaking slightly, and sobbing softly. The boy's soft crying kept echoing in this dilapidated shop, making Lavender, who was standing by, a little at a loss. This was the first time in decades that he felt so helpless, and even the dead wand was thrown aside by him. He came to Carol, thought for a long time, and stammered, "Child, I'm sorry. I don't know your past. If I have made you sad again, I apologize to you, but don't be afraid. Lavender will definitely find a wand that's just right for you." "No, sir, I messed up. I'm always like this." Karl slowly raised his head. His red eyes matched his handsome and cute face. She looked so pitiful that Lavender, who was standing by, quickly waved his hand and said, "No, that's absolutely not the case. You are an excellent child, and the powerful magic in your body is proof of that. It's just that the wand is not suitable for you. It doesn't prove that you have a dark heart. Wait a minute, I will help you find it right away." After saying that, he rushed into the shop, leaving Karl, who was still wiping his tears, and Professor Snape, with a complicated expression, standing there. Good, perfect acting, just what a villain needs, but there are still flaws in the details. Since the host performed so well in his first performance, a special reward, best actor level acting skills, is given. Use your performance to deceive everyone, then play with their hearts. Hehehe. Just as Cole was about to calm down and come back to his senses from the performance, the voice of the dog system sounded again. Listening to the other party's description, Carol's face immediately darkened, and he even felt a little sad. Is he that kind of person? This is simply serious slander, coupled with the fact that he has not yet completely emerged from the performance state. The two factors have compounded each other. The sad expression appeared on his face again, and this time it didn't seem like an act. Such a genuine expression made Professor Snape a little confused. He even doubted his own judgment just now. He couldn't help but take 2 steps forward, and when he came behind Karl, he looked at the boy wiping his tears. The damp feeling of guilt surged into his heart once again, and he stretched out a hand, wanting to comfort the other person. Just as he stretched out his hand, a loud shout came from the store. "Severus, what are you doing? Stop it immediately. You will scare him." After the voice, a cloud of dust flashed by, and Lavender was holding a few old wooden boxes that he had found from somewhere. He walked over hurriedly and slapped Snape's dirty hands away. "You'll scare him, and I won't allow you to treat my customers like this." Professor Snape, who was inexplicably sprayed in the face, looked even more terribly gloomy. From a crow that was about to get angry, it successfully evolved into a vampire in the Dark Knight. This kind of dress and expression made Lavender completely believe that this guy had bad intentions. After all, This was the state of the two when they first entered the store. He saw it all, so he quickly waved his hand to drive it away. Go. Wait outside the door first, and don't scare the poor child anymore. Professor Snape wanted to explain, but his appearance and expression were really ugly. Unable to defend himself, he was forcibly escorted out of the shop by Ollivander. Seeing this, Cole tried hard to suppress the urge to laugh. Continue to enter the performance state and say beggingly, "No need for that, sir. I know Professor Snape is a good man. Don't worry about him, kid. The most important thing for you right now is to calm down and let nature take its course so that you can find your wand." Ollivander was very pleased. In his eyes, Cole was like an angel, because only an angel would say good things about a black bat. But in his shop, he has the final say. After eliminating Professor Snape, the unfavorable off-site factor, he opened the wooden box in front of him with great interest, took out a magic wand, and handed it over. For 9 inches, dragon heartstring core, suitable for crack. Before he could finish his words, there was a flash of silver light, and the wand was unfortunately sacrificed. Then the above process was repeated with applewood, prickly ashwood, unicorn tail hair, and thestral tail feathers. All kinds of magic wands were used one after another, but without exception, all died in Karl's hands. Looking at the burnt sticks lined up in a row, Karl couldn't help feeling a little ashamed. "Sir, this is not your fault, sir. If it really doesn't work, I don't think it's necessary." Upon hearing this, Ollivander, who was initially heartbroken about the death of so many wands, immediately jumped up. "What are you talking about, sir? Ollivander has your wand. There is no doubt about it. None of these things are worthy of you. Your heart is too desperate and hateful. Only similar items can attract your attention. Despair and hatred. Despair and hatred." Ollivander kept repeating this sentence and kept circling the store. After a long time, he slowly stopped, took a deep breath, and moved a metal box from the bottom of a shelf that was about to collapse. He searched for a long time in the shabby counter next to him before he took out a bunch of bronze keys and unlocked the door. After 5 minutes, he handed over a dark magic wand. "This is a wand made from the spine of an extinct black dragon and the tail feathers of a thestral. It's 15 inches. The black dragon represents despair, and the thestrals represent death. I think this should be suitable for you." Chapter 7 Gift. Looking at this black spine-shaped magic wand, Karl's face twitched wildly, because the shape of the magic wand was so special. If it happened in a movie, when someone pulled out a weapon like this, the word villain would almost be written on his face. This was totally inconsistent with his low-key style of doing things, so he spoke tactfully. "Excuse me, Mr. Ollivander, but..." Before he could refuse, the annoying voice in his head sounded again. "You are so handsome, host. Such an elegant and evil wand is simply the standard equipment for villains. Please accept it quickly. Let's stir up a bloody storm in the magic world." Seeing that the dog system was not only a dog, but also seemed to be a little abnormal, Karl of course refused it sternly. "No, I don't want to have the word villain stuck on my face before I even enter the academy. That's really stupid. No, you need it. No, I don't want it. No, you need it. One person, one system." They kept arguing in their minds. Even in Ollivander in reality. Everyone thought that Cole was standing there in a daze because he hadn't found a suitable wand for a long time and was a little depressed. Just when he was about to persuade the other party, the system finally couldn't win over Karl and gave its final price. "No, you must accept this elegant wand and immediately reward the host with god-level hand proficiency. This reward will make your fingers and arms extremely flexible, no matter when performing magic or any human hand movement. You will reach the pinnacle." "Okay, I need it." Upon hearing that there was a reward, Karl compromised very smoothly and returned to reality immediately. He said with a smile to Ollivander, who was standing beside him and ready to comfort him, "I'm sorry, sir. I was a little distracted just now. I just didn't expect that you could do this for me." As he spoke, the magical acting skills were performed again, and a few tears fell from the corners of Karl's eyes. Seeing how distressed Ollivander was, he completely forgot that he had just been in a daze for no apparent reason, and hurried to comfort him. Kit, this is definitely not your fault. You must have been through pain we can't even imagine, but you are safe now. Try this wand. It should suit you well. Thank you. Cole was still performing. His face was full of emotion and he took the wand from the other person with trembling hands. As soon as he took the wand, a strange feeling immediately filled his hands. This wand was not as scary and disgusting as it seemed. Instead, he felt a cool and warm feeling like jade, and at the same time he felt the muscles in his hands contracting. Just like data being read from a hard drive. Every muscle in my hand acquired countless memories in an instant. Karl subconsciously raised his wand and waved it around as if possessed by a ghost. Silvery white mist emanated from the top of the wand, floating in the air and gradually condensing into shape. Merlin's underpants. Ollivander looked at the silver white mist above his head, puzzled at first, and then screamed in surprise. The Patronus charm. It's actually the Patronus charm. It's no wonder that he lost his composure. Not to mention, the Patronus charm is an extremely advanced defensive spell against the dark arts, which many adult wizards cannot master in their lifetime. But the young man in front of him, just after getting the wand, he spontaneously used the Patronus charm. In the air, the silver white guardian angel finally gradually took shape, and a phoenix with spread wings began to soar in this broken shop. Phoenix. Your Patronus is a phoenix. Ollivander fell into complete madness. He excitedly grabbed Karl's arm and pointed at the phoenix still soaring in the sky. Your Patronus is exactly the same as Headmaster Dumbledore's. You will definitely become a great wizard, Mr. Karl. And this is proof that you are not evil at heart. He is just filled with hatred and despair, like a diamond wrapped in a briquette. You have good intentions in your heart, and I was right. I am right. My ideals and beliefs are right. Ollivander yelled madly. His voice was harsh and loud, and even the door that had just been propped up seemed to fall to the ground again because of the yelling. As the dust flew, Professor Snape reappeared. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked intently at the silver phoenix soaring in the store. He also looked stunned. Seeing a professor standing there in a daze and a shop owner who seemed to be going crazy with joy, Karl could only put away his wand silently. The Patronus also dissipated, and Ollivander and Professor Snape finally recovered from their shock. A perfect performance, Mr. Karl. Ollivander smiled and patted Karl on the shoulder and nodded continuously. This scene will be recorded forever in the history of the Ollivander family. It is a milestone in the history of wand making. Your appearance has fully proved that any magical creation cannot be inherently evil, whether it's the Thestrals representing death or the black dragons representing despair. These magical animals carry a lot of meaning. It's just our groundless guess. I believe you will become a great wizard in the future. Then, how much should I pay you? Karl blushed for the rare time when he was praised like this, but after he asked this question, Ollivander's face changed immediately, and he pushed him and Professor Snape out of the shop while yelling loudly, "Today's significance is priceless. I will not allow anyone to insult this day with money. You guys go away. I want to enjoy my success." Clang. The poor door panel was ruthlessly thrown against the door frame for the third time, and Professor Snape and Cole were kicked out of the store. I could only stand there and listen to the creepy laughter coming from the store. 10 full minutes passed, and the laughter didn't stop. Until Professor Snape, who was standing by, seemed unable to bear such embarrassment and took his hands out from behind his back. Then he handed a cage to Karl and said with a still cold expression, "I don't want you to get too hung up on this, but you are a special student after all, and the principal wants you to bring a pet to school in your first year. Whatever you say, it will make it easier for you to feel the love in your heart. Since you wasted too much time choosing a wand, I bought you a raven." Looking at the pitch black bird in the cage, Karl couldn't help but laugh, because this raven really looked like Professor Snape in front of him. But he was still polite, took the cage and nodded. "Thank you, Professor Snape. I will treasure it." Karl didn't know if it was an illusion, but he found that the moment he took the cage, Professor Snape was obviously relieved. Obviously, this arrogant old man was also afraid that he would not accept his gift. "Most pets have names. What do you want to call it, Snape?" said coldly, as if it wasn't a gift at all. Faced with such a proud behavior, Karl looked at the raven in the cage, and then at Professor Snape. In his heart, he really wanted to name the bird Severus Snape, but considering that their relationship had finally improved, he said calmly, I would like to call it. Unfortunately, things don't always go as we wish, and that annoying voice sounded in my mind again. As a villain, he cannot miss any opportunity to humiliate the professor and violate school rules, so he named his crow Severus Snape. Trigger chain rewards. Magical animals are naturally friendly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Toad and An-039, SNAPE An-039. I shall call it Severus Snape. The cold words spoken by the young man made the air around them drop several degrees. May I ask why? Even colder words came out of Professor Snape's mouth, making the air around him seem to freeze. Snape stared at Karl, which made him feel embarrassed and guilty. If you are not a student, I will not be loyal. Unfortunately, the system is not human and the other party gave too much, but fortunately I have a god level performance talent. This series of inner thoughts were not expressed in his facial expressions. Karl first looked at Professor Snape with a smile. He pretended to be delighted, as if he had just received a gift, but soon after seeing the other person's expression, he lowered his head and spoke in a low voice. No one has ever given me a gift. Never. I want to name it after you to remember this moment. I know this is very rash, but if I may. Okay. Snape said quickly. The damp feeling of guilt surged up in his heart again, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Interacting with the young man in front of him gave him a feeling as if two fully armed swordsmen were competing in fencing. The opponent hardly had to put in any effort, but his body was already full of holes, giving him the feeling of being completely controlled by others. I have only experienced this with an old guy who likes to eat candy, and this feeling is really uncomfortable. He had to end this damn discussion quickly. He grabbed the other person's shoulders and said with a cold face, time is running out. Let's leave quickly. After saying that, Snape waved his wand again, activated the apparition, and after 2 explosions of air, the two returned to the 9 3/4 station point. As soon as the two of them stood on the platform, the steam train next to them made a humming sound. This is the signal for departure, Snape urged hurriedly. Okay, the train is about to leave, so hurry up and get on board. This urging was not out of good intentions, but simply because he didn't want to stay with this boy anymore. He already had a preliminary judgment about Karl. This boy is poisonous and cannot be kept in contact with for long periods of time. But it was obvious that Karl had no idea what was going on in his mind, and after just 1 hour of spending time together, he still felt a little guilty towards the professor, so he bowed and thanked the other party with real emotion. Thank you, Professor. I know you are a good professor. Although you have a cold face and greasy hair, I still want to express my sincere gratitude to you. Faced with this thank you, Professor Snape's face twitched, and he raised his right hand like a javelin pointing at the door of the carriage boarding. Seeing all his enthusiasm go to waste, Karl couldn't help but feel a little angry. He snorted coldly and walked into the car with a pout. Professor Snape looked at this troublemaker and refused to sit down in the carriage. He waited until the door of the carriage was closed before he apparated away. Karl sat down in his seat and looked at the empty platform and couldn't help feeling a little angry. Despite my sincere thanks, the other party didn't appreciate it and clearly wanted to wait until I got in the car before leaving. But he is unwilling to accept other people's kindness. What a twisted and arrogant guy. Feeling a little annoyed, he pulled out a pack of American Camel cigarettes from his pocket, took out a cigarette, and casually put it in his mouth. Just as he was about to light the fire, he felt something hitting his foot, and he quickly looked over. All he saw was a disgusting toad lying on his feet and yawning. He tried hard to suppress his nausea. I picked up the toad with 2 fingers and looked at it in front of my eyes, but I couldn't see anything special. So he looked at the toad in his hand, then looked at the raven in the cage next to him, and then he chuckled. He was about to throw the toad into the cage and give Snape a good meal point, but just as he opened the door of the iron cage and was about to throw the disgusting little thing in, the door of the box was suddenly knocked open by someone. Then there was a loud scream, "Don't eat my Lev." The scream was so loud that it gave Karl some tinnitus. He quickly turned his head to look. I saw a little fat boy looking at me with tears and snot. After seeing me for the first time. He then remembered this little fat boy, the hidden real savior, Neville Longbottom. And the little brown girl behind him is the famous Miss Know-It-All, the lovely Miss Beaver, Granger Hermione. The sudden arrival of the two people made him feel a little embarrassed and at a loss. Not to mention that he was planning to kill the other party's toad. He fed it to his own Snape, so he quickly put the toad down, coughed lightly a few times, and after covering up his embarrassment, he said the villain first. "You two suddenly barged into my box. Is there something going on? This is very rude." This righteous questioning immediately calmed the two little guys, and they both apologized at the same time. "I'm sorry, sir. We shouldn't be so reckless. Okay, I forgive you," Karl said generously. After hearing that they were forgiven, the two were obviously relieved, but soon a clever Miss Know-It-All reacted first. "That's not right. We came here to find Neville's pet, and we just saw it with our own eyes. You were going to feed Neville's toad to your crow. Why are we the ones apologizing?" "What? A smart girl," but Carol didn't want her to be too smart, so he quickly changed the subject. "My dear lady, first of all, you broke into my box without saying hello. This is your mistake. Secondly, I have no intention of feeding this disgusting toad to Snape, and my raven will never eat such disgusting food." As he said this, he looked at Snape in the cage beside him and said with a smile, "Right, my noble professor, thanks to the natural affinity for magical animals he had acquired previously." Karl's question was quickly responded to. The pitch black crow flew out of the cage gracefully and calmly, put its wings behind its back, and strode towards the toad. Then he stepped on the other person and turned his head away proudly, making to cackle sounds. This scene stunned the two people outside the door and also shocked Carol. This is simply the future. Professor Snape's animal version of the school bully Neville. The expressions and movements are exactly the same. "I'm sorry, sir. Please let Leaf go." Seeing his pet being bullied like this, the fat boy Neville begged for mercy again and again, and no longer thought about it at all. His own toad had almost died a few seconds ago. Seeing that the little fat boy's eyes were almost swollen from crying, Karl couldn't help feeling a little ashamed, so he immediately took the poor toad. He rescued it from Snape's feet, then pinched it with 2 fingers, suppressed his nausea, and returned it to the fat boy. At the same time, ask the other party not to thank you anymore, and allow the other party to leave your car, keeping your credit and achievement hidden. Karl returned to his seat, took out his lighter, and lit a cigarette, but before he could enjoy the pleasure brought by nicotine. A familiar voice sounded again. "You actually smoked. Not only did you violate school rules, you were breaking the law, sir." Chapter 9. This is not the behavior of Aran-039, VILLAIN-039. Karl shifted his gaze over and saw our Miss Know-It-All staring at him menacingly. She showed no signs of shyness when meeting a stranger. She strode forward, fanning away the smoke with her hand, while continuing to speak bluntly. "In the UK, smoking by minors is against the law. How can you do this?" Karl never had a favorable impression of such naughty behavior, which was of course just like the jokes circulating on the internet in his previous life. The judgment of any behavior is based on the appearance of the subject. If you are handsome and quiet, you are a cool and handsome guy. But if you are ugly and quiet, then you are a greasy and introverted man. Faced with the accusations of a cute little girl, he still wanted to tease her, so he used his usual trick of cheating. Karl first looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, creating a hazy feeling under the cover of cigarette smoke. Then he used his superb acting skills to pretend a helpless and lonely expression, and finally took out 2 pieces of paper and handed them over. "This is a certificate issued by the Mayo Clinic in the United States and the Oxford Medical School in the United Kingdom. I have improved my cognitive and emotional aspects. I have a congenital deficiency, so the doctor allowed me to smoke 10 cigarettes a day. This is a medical nicotine treatment method. If you mind, I can leave this carriage first. I'm sorry, miss, but you probably don't want to be friends with me, just like those people before. This moving performance and the 2 authoritative medical certificates turned the whole situation around in an instant. Hermione held the 2 pieces of paper, her eyes full of nervousness and shame, and she wanted to explain several times, but she couldn't say a word. Finally, feeling guilty, she could only throw the 2 medical certificates on the table and return them to Carol, yelling, "I'm sorry sir, I didn't know it would be like this." Then she ran away. Seeing the girl's panicked back, Karl supported his face with one hand and couldn't help but smile. There was a sense of accomplishment from a successful prank, but it was obvious that, whenever he was happy, that annoying voice would ring in his mind. Congratulations to the host, you have successfully played with the feelings of an ignorant girl. You are indeed a born scumbag, an absolute villain. Your points will be increased by 10. You already have 40 points. When your points reach 100, you can draw a prize once. 50 draws, guaranteed to get god level skills. Damn, this damn system. What does it mean to play with the feelings of an ignorant girl? What does it mean to be a born scumbag? It's pure slander and bullshit. I just played a little prank, but this is really a system that is always late. Even the judgment is so rubbish. Karl cursed at the system frantically in his mind, his expression gradually becoming more and more crazy until he felt as if someone was approaching him. Then he quickly put on a resentful look, and the speed at which his expression changed was lightning fast. When he came back to reality, he saw Hermione standing in front of him with her face flushed with shame. "Is there anything else, miss? If it's because of what happened before, I apologize to you again." Karl continued with his previous acting style and continued to use his performance to play with the other person's sense of shame. Sure enough, after hearing this, Hermione waved her hands frantically, wanting to explain, but she really didn't know how to start. Under the combined emotions of shame and anxiety, she was left with only one choice. That's the killer weapon of women, crying. Looking at the lolly in front of me, with her head lowered and her shoulders heaving, I could hear the slight sobbing sound. Karl cried out that something was wrong. It was all over. It seemed like something had gone wrong. He quickly stood up and helped Hermione to her seat in the box. Looking at the crying girl lying on the table, Karl's face was operating wildly. He had not dealt with such a situation for a long time. I was at a loss for a moment and even sought help from the system in my mind. What should I do now? I don't want to be labeled a bad boy before I even get to school. Host, have you been kicked in the head by a donkey? I'm a villain system. I want to tell you how to seduce and play with girls. I can give you thousands of suggestions, but sorry, there is none. Looking at the big words in his mind, Carol couldn't help but frown, and he was also having a brain spasm. That's why I would think of asking the system for help. This guy's not reliable at all. After thinking about it, he suddenly remembered that the Patronus charm seemed to be able to eliminate negative emotions, although in movies and novels the only use of this magic is to fight dementors, but it should have some special uses after all. It turns out that these ghost things like dementors are more like real products of negative energy. Without thinking about anything else, Karl took out his wand, waved it lightly upwards, and whispered, "Expecto Patronum." Silvery white mist gushed out from the top of the magic wand and gradually condensed into shape in the air. A phoenix with spread wings kept flying in the narrow carriage. It slowly landed on Karl's shoulder and rubbed Karl's face gently with its little face. A warm and peaceful breath immediately filled Karl's whole body. It was indeed effective. After feeling this, Karl stroked the imaginary little phoenix, then pointed at Hermione, who was still crying on the table. This little guy was very human-like. He immediately flew to the girl's shoulder and used his little head to rub the girl's messy hair. Soon, Hermione stopped crying and slowly raised her head. The moment she saw the silver phoenix, her expression was filled with surprise. "This is magic. It's really amazing." Hermione's eyes were full of curiosity, and her gaze was fixed on the silver phoenix. Curiosity about magic suppressed the sadness and shame in my heart. "Ah, you're not crying anymore. You mean girl? Yes, this is magic. It's my Patronus." Seeing that Hermione finally stopped crying. Karl finally breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but teasing her. Hermione knew she was being teased, so she immediately wiped the tears from her eyes and said with a pout, pretending to be strong, "I'm not a mean person. By the way, I don't know your name yet. My name is Hermione Granger. What do you call me, senior?" As she spoke, the little girl stretched out her right hand, hoping to shake hands with the other party and formally get to know each other. Seeing this, Karl just smiled faintly, stretched out his right hand, and shook the other person's hand like a gentleman. "My name is Karl Hohenzollern. Nice to meet you, meanie, and I'm not some senior, like you. I'm also a first year student at Hogwarts." "How is that possible? With your height and appearance, you must be at least 15 years old. Could it be that I'm sorry that I must be suspicious like this? Could it be that there is something wrong with your intelligence?" When Hermione heard Karl say that he was also a freshman, she immediately exclaimed that it was impossible, and then made her own speculation. Faced with this malicious speculation, the smile on Karl's face immediately disappeared, and he was about to explain to the other party. Then I heard that annoying voice again. The host actually used magic to comfort a crying girl in public. This is definitely not what a villain should do. 40 points deducted. Current points 0. Chapter 10 Cedric Diggory. The voice of the dog system appeared again, making the smile on Karl's face disappear even more completely. He looked at Hermione first, and the girl couldn't help but dodge after feeling his gaze. But after a moment, he put his hands on his hips and said confidently, "You didn't even ask me why I came back to this carriage, but just kept apologizing to me. Did I have a chance to speak?" Hearing this, Karl took a deep breath, turned his head mechanically, and looked at the open door of the carriage. Sure enough, I saw a group of students, big and small, surrounding the door of my carriage, staring at the interior of the carriage in amazement. In the middle of the aisle where they gathered, a group of Scottish chickens of all sizes were neatly lined up in a row. At the front of this special queue, Snape, dressed in all black, was pacing back and forth in front of the group of plump owls with his wings on his back. The pet version of Potions Teaching live broadcast was being performed. Seeing this scene, Cole was still wondering what was going on. That annoying voice in my mind sounded again. "Host, remember to turn off your magical animal's natural affinity, otherwise all the pets on the entire train will be affected. They will all come to you." Hearing this, Karl could only greet the dog system with sweet words in his mind. In reality, he put away his wand and dispelled the magic, then gracefully asked Hermione to get up and leave her seat, and directly escorted her out of the carriage. Finally, under the gaze of a group of onlookers, he grabbed Snape and put it in his pocket, then closed the carriage door at lightning speed. Sitting alone in the seat, with his head down in deep thought. It's over. This was the only thought in Karl's mind. After all, he had been working hard for so many years to represent public opinion in the United States, organizing a gang. He has accumulated rich experience by engaging in international trade, arms smuggling, and running a pharmaceutical company, selling psychotropic drugs. It is very clear that when you arrive in an unfamiliar city or place, the best way to start a business, develop an organization, is to hide first. You can't let yourself become the focus, otherwise your every move will be noticed. Although he and Professor Snape had some minor frictions in Diagon Alley before, the other party was a professor after all. Besides, in a school, all the professors combined only have a few pairs of eyes now on this train. I'm afraid I have become the focus among the students. This is extremely bad news for completing the tasks of the dog system, or doing what you want to do. Just as Cole was racking his brains over what to do next, the door of the carriage was knocked again. He didn't immediately stand up to open the door for the other person. After all, he didn't want to attract attention. But the person knocking on the door seemed very patient and kept knocking on the carriage door politely but continuously. He had no choice but to get up and open the door. When the door of the carriage opened, both people inside and outside the door were startled at the same time. Damn, there is a man who is more handsome than me. This is Karl's psychological activity. Merlin's skirt, did I see an angel? This was the young man's psychological activity outside the door. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. Although he was shocked, the man reacted very quickly, and a warm smile immediately appeared on his face. He directly held Karl's right hand and said, "Hello, I'm Cedric Diggory, a third-year Hufflepuff student. Just now a little girl said that you might not be used to being in a crowded environment, so I was a little worried and wanted to come over to check." Karl was also stunned for a moment, and then he suddenly remembered that the person in front of him was the Hogwarts version of other people's children, Cedric, who has gained great popularity despite only appearing in one movie, quickly turned sideways and extended a hand. "Please come in, senior. Thank you for your concern." As soon as the two sat down, Cedric started talking non-stop. He was indeed a true Hufflepuff, kind and enthusiastic. He did not dwell on Karl's special age, but instead thought that he was born into a Muggle family. There are many things you need to know about Hogwarts that new students should know. He kept talking, and Karl, in order to maintain his character of having communication difficulties, just sat there and listened quietly. "Don't be too nervous. The classmates in school are all very nice people, especially the professors." Seeing that Carol didn't say a word, Cedric really thought that the other party was unwilling to talk because of his inner loneliness, especially when he saw the two medical certificates on the table. He became even more enthusiastic. I began to talk about the 4 major colleges of Hogwarts and the characteristics of each dean. Although Professor McGonagall usually appears very strict, as long as you attend class seriously and abide by the rules, she is still a very easy person to talk to, and you don't have to worry. Most of the time, her energy and anger are basically vented on Gryffindor. Professor Flitwick's personality is even more interesting. In short, he is very eccentric. Oh, and he has goblin blood, so don't discuss his height. As for Professor Sprout of my college, she is a very gentle lady, as long as you don't touch the plants in the greenhouse. As for Slytherin and Professor Snape, well, when talking about Professor Snape, even this extremely enthusiastic boy was speechless for a moment. Or, let's skip this step first. Seeing that the other party really couldn't think of any adjectives, Carol didn't want the other party to feel uncomfortable, so he quickly opened his mouth and gestured to skip it. But his action obviously made the other Snape very dissatisfied. Caw. 2 cries of ravens came from Carl's pocket, followed by a black shadow flashing by. It was a raven with a pitch black body. Flying to the table between the two of them. Snape first glanced at Cedric, then strode in front of him. With its hard beak, it pecked the other's finger hard. "Ah, you okay?" Karl asked nervously, looking at Snape and speaking in a bad tone. "You are such a rude and stinking crow." But unexpectedly, this guy cried out in dissatisfaction, then walked into the iron cage beside him with his 2 pitch black wings on his back. Then he squatted there without moving, with only his back facing the 2 men. Witnessing this scene, Karl's face twitched wildly, but Cedric, who was standing next to him, said with shining eyes, "How cool." He pointed at the raven and said with emotion, "This bird looks exactly like Professor Snape." Hearing this, Carol wanted to speak several times, but he didn't know how to start. Cedric, however, seemed to have found a topic to talk about. He excitedly grabbed Carl's hand and spoke seriously with shining eyes. "So, you don't have to worry about not being able to make friends. Just with this bird, I think you'll have a lot of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff classmates. I'm willing to be your friend. Besides, you're already a celebrity among the freshmen, so don't worry." Hearing the other party say, "Don't worry" twice in a row, Karl felt as if he was stabbed with a knife in the heart. He really wanted to stand up and roar. This was what he was worried about. But now, he could only look at Cedric awkwardly, pointing at the raven in the cage, and said helplessly, "Actually, this is a gift from Professor Snape, and its name is Severus Snape." "What? Wow. So cool." Chapter 11 The Weasley Brothers. 2 different exclamations came from inside and outside the carriage respectively. Cedric and Karl looked towards the carriage door at the same time. I only saw that the door of the box had been opened at some point, and 2 little wizards were leaning against the door frame. Peeking into the carriage, they looked exactly like they were cast in the same mold. They all had flaming red hair, and even the expressions on their faces looked exactly the same. Fred, George, Cedric greeted them awkwardly, looking at Karl beside him, and introducing them hurriedly. They are twins from the Weasley family. They are both very upright and friendly classmates. However, unlike me, they are from Gryffindor House, he explained hurriedly, fearing that Cole would be dissatisfied with the sudden intrusion of these two guys. Cole was not dissatisfied, or rather, he didn't even have the chance to express his opinion. The twins were very natural and familiar. Seeing that the owner of the carriage did not drive them away, they walked in one after another. One of them suddenly opened his arms and looked at Cedric with an exaggerated expression. "Who is this? How come I forgot who he is?" Another one immediately took over. "Then you are really a fool, George. You don't even know him. This is Mr. Diggory, the student who has been ranked first in the grade for 2 consecutive years, a model student in the eyes of all teachers and parents, and our most enthusiastic classmate." The two of them had exaggerated movements and expressions, like they were performing a crosstalk, with one talking at the same time and making Karl, who was standing beside them, chuckle. Only Cedric, the person involved, had his ears red with embarrassment, and he saw that the other party wanted to say something. He quickly changed the subject. "When you two come here, shouldn't you say hello to the owner of the carriage first? You don't have to tell me." Fred chuckled and walked up to Karl, holding his right hand. He bent over and performed a gentlemanly etiquette, as if he was performing a drama. "My name is Fred Weasley, and I greet you, my lord, the noble Master Snape." After he finished speaking, another person hurried over. His expression was even more exaggerated. He knelt down on one knee with one hand on his chest. "I salute you, my king. Anyone who can receive a gift from Professor Snape is a god in my heart. My name is George Weasley, and it's a pleasure to meet you." Karl looked at the interesting twins in front of him, and suddenly felt like playing. He slowly stood up, using his hand instead of a sword. He tapped George and Fred on the shoulder, then coughed twice and spoke in a deep voice with his magical performance. "Rise up, my knights. I have heard of your heroic deeds at Hogwarts, so I specially anoint you here, sir. Double star of the Weasley family." Hearing this, the twins immediately looked at each other, stood up with curiosity on their faces, and high-fived excitedly. "Did you hear that, George?" "Oh no, I should call you Sir George." "Of course, my dear Sir Fred." The twins deliberately greeted each other and then hugged each other warmly. At the beginning, the scene was a little cold. The room immediately became lively with the addition of these two people, and after they started talking, the four of them sat down one after another and began to talk about almost anything. Of course, Karl and Cedric mainly acted as audience members, and the performance stage was given to the two brothers. Karl also used the stolen gold galleons to buy a lot of snacks and gave them to the twins as a reward for being knighted. He hid in the corner and watched how these two men bullied Cedric. The two of them were talking to each other, talking about how Cedric was popular with the female classmates in the college, how he excelled in his studies, and how his father showed off his outstanding son in front of their parents. He told it all with all the exaggeration. Poor, kind-hearted Cedric could only endure it silently, his face flushed with shame. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore and had to resign himself to asking, "Well, my father's behavior has caused you trouble this time. Tell me what I can do to let him go." Seeing that the plan was successful, the twins looked at each other silently, rubbed their fingers and said, "Of course, take out all your summer homework immediately and let us learn from it." "That's right. We've been looking for you for more than half a month, but you were never home. Mother said you went to America to become a vampire and fell in love. I heard there's another child. Is that true?" "Of course it's fake." Cedric's ears turned red, and he retorted angrily, but his actions did not slow down at all. He took his school bag from the luggage rack and handed his homework to the two people. The two brothers took over the homework and immediately started to borrow lessons. The two brothers had a clear division of labor and their movements were extremely skillful. It took less than 10 minutes to finish the thick pile of homework by borrowing from each other. It can be seen that they do this kind of thing frequently in their daily lives. Cedric on the side couldn't stand it anymore. He lowered his voice and said, "Can't you take your homework to your compartment? You're doing this in front of new students. It will have a bad impact." New classmate. After completing the reference, Fred looked at Karl beside him, then turned to look at Cedric. Then he shook his head frantically. Impossible. He is more handsome than you, and he exudes a mature vibe. You look immature in front of him. How could he be a new classmate? George quickly added. Exactly. If you say he is a senior in the 7th grade, I believe it, but he definitely can't be a freshman. Facing the two people's doubts, Carol did not comment and continued to speak in the same low voice as before. Karl Hohenzollern, 15 years old, indeed a new student at Hogwarts. My background is rather special. I will explain it to you in detail after you enroll. You don't have to doubt that this raven is Professor Snape, as a school admission present to me when I was choosing my wand. When the Weirlight Twins heard this, they immediately made a look of surprise and moved in unison, as if they had copied and pasted each other. Then the two looked at each other again, and suddenly their eyes turned, and they quickly came to Carol and said with a strange expression, Karl, you know what? You can't actually be considered a real Hogwarts student right now. That's right. Only after passing rigorous tests can one be considered truly enrolled. Seeing the twins' actions, Cedric immediately put his hand on his forehead, but he did not interrupt the prank during the sorting ceremony. Intimidating the new wizards has always been a tradition for all wizards. Even young wizards who come from wizard families will not get any real information beforehand. This behavior can be called the umbrella tearing operation in the wizarding world, with unspoken tacit understanding. This tradition has been preserved for hundreds of years, and it is not easy for him to break such an unspoken rule. But it is obvious that the twins now want to severely intimidate Karl. After all, the other party has just been in the limelight. Playing a prank on such a person is undoubtedly very fulfilling, but Cedric, who was standing aside, always had an inexplicable worry in his heart. He always felt that they would be the ones who would suffer in the end due to this prank. Chapter 12, Routines and Anti-Routines. But no matter what he thought in his heart, the Weirlight Twins beside him had already entered the state. Cough. Cough. Fred cleared his throat first, and his face instantly became solemn and slightly frightened. His eyes first closed slowly, then suddenly opened, as if he was awakened from a nightmare. I really don't want to recall the experience back then. It's really too horrible. George, who was standing by, quickly agreed. Yes, it's really terrifying. In our class, the young wizards had to hold out for 10 minutes under the troll's hands, and then they would be assigned to a school based on their performance. Oh, and you know what a troll is? That guy is as tall as a mountain and can crush you with just 1 foot. Karl also cooperated very well. His expression changed to one of fear almost instantly, and his voice also changed back to normal. Really? That would be just as scary as the brown bear I hunted in South Carolina. Of course. George was delighted at first, but soon came to his senses, turned to look at Karl, and asked with a puzzled look on his face, have you ever hunted a brown bear? Yes. Karl nodded calmly. The brown bear's name is Beretito, and it lives in the mountains of South Carolina. It attacked many people and killed many cattle and sheep. Karl began to vividly describe the entire process of hunting the brown bear, which was extremely thrilling. Coupled with his god-level acting skills and the application of some common horror element, George and Fred were horrified. The two were so scared that they hugged each other. Finally, that night, that cunning guy sneaked into our cabin. I didn't dare to light the light, because I could smell its stench and the hot breath. I just kept waiting. Finally, there was a bang, and the flash from the muzzle lit up the entire cabin. This 800-pound bad guy died less than 2 inches from my bedside. After telling the story, Cole took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it slowly, and then stared out the window, as if recalling the past. But he still admired the frightened expressions of the Weirlight Twins out of the corner of his eyes, and felt quite proud. I combined the traditional horror story of the grandma bear with the stories of several famous man-eating bears in real life. Combined with his own performance. It is indeed scary enough. The frightened Weirlight Twins ate 6 honey cakes before they recovered. They wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads in unison, and then looked at Karl, who was smoking, and lost in his memories. George spoke first, unable to help but admire her. That's amazing. No wonder you were able to get a gift from Professor Snape, if that's possible. How about taking Professor Snape's big bat away with the shotgun as well. Hearing this, Cedric, who was standing by, put his hand on his forehead repeatedly. He admitted that Karl's performance was indeed wonderful. The whole story is also very fascinating, but the subtle traces of splicing can still be felt. However, he did not intend to remind the twins that the story was fake. In fact, he was happy to appreciate the panic-stricken look of these two naughty ghosts. He even wanted to hear the other party say it again, so he pretended to be apologetic and said apologetically to Carol, "I'm sorry, I seemed to be distracted just now. Can you please tell me again?" Hearing this, Karl put out the cigarette in his hand and looked at Cedric with a smirk on his face. He didn't expect that this guy, who was as handsome as himself, with fair face and red lips, was actually a white and black man. But of course he would not miss this opportunity and secretly winked at her. He signaled Cedric to close the door of the carriage first, and then he pulled the curtains of the carriage, making the whole carriage a little darker. Then he slowly approached the two brothers and said with a strange expression, "Have you heard of the American Horror Story that exists across the ocean?" This action really scared the two brothers. They leaned on each other, huddled in a corner of the carriage, and shook their heads desperately. But unfortunately, Karl's story is like this train. Once it starts moving, there is no way it can be stopped. As for the reason, that annoying voice kept ringing in Karl's mind. Congratulations to the host for successfully scaring his classmate. Please keep up the good work. The more seriously the other party is frightened, the more points you will get. Villain points increase by 20. In C. D. Hogwarts Castle. Professor Snape walked quickly towards the headmaster's office with his signature steps and came to the door. He didn't knock on the door, but pushed it open roughly. There was a loud bang, which scared the old man in the seat so much that he shivered, and the candy in his hand fell to the ground, making him sigh. "You're back, Severus. Thank you for your hard work. How's the child? Is he outstanding?" The headmaster of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, cast a gentle gaze at Snape through his half-moon glasses. However, facing the kindness of this principal who looked like Santa Claus, Snape's face looked extremely ugly. "Albus, we shouldn't have accepted this child. You know his background, and you should know what this means. He is not an ordinary teenager. His intelligence and sophistication are definitely not what a 15-year-old boy should have." At this point, Snape seemed to recall something, then sighed and said, "With his extraordinary magical talent, this child is simply a bomb. You can't put a landmine that could explode at any time among a group of children who don't know anything." "Don't be so harsh, Severus." Dumbledore smiled. "He is definitely a good boy, and there is definitely love in his heart. I suppose you must know that, or you wouldn't have thought of giving him a gift." Snape did not answer. In his mind, the whole thing made him extremely embarrassed. After a moment of silence, he still had to admit it. "I can't be sure, but he did cast the Patronus charm spontaneously while choosing his wand." "That's right." Dumbledore's eyes lit up, and he sat up slightly straighter. "You and I both know what this spell means. Dress up nicely. For example, your hairstyle is very good now, such a delicate silver gray color. I'm really happy for you that you can make a change. We are about to usher in the most grand day of the year. Hogwarts will welcome many lovely children again." I heard the other person start discussing his hairstyle just like that little bastard. Professor Snape had no intention of staying, but when he reached the door, he turned around and asked again, "But at least you have to tell me about this child's background. After all, her child is going to join the school this year. Trust me, Severus," Dumbledore said seriously, his eyes unusually firm. "He won't hurt Harry, I assure you, but I'm sorry I can't tell you his background yet." Professor Snape, who was standing at the door, looked at the old man in front of him for a long time, then retracted his gaze and turned away. All that was left was this huge room, a lonely old man, and a bunch of chattering portraits. Chapter 13 Arrival. The train headed north and the sky gradually darkened. When the sun disappeared at the end of the beautiful Scottish plateau, this magic train finally arrived at its final destination. The passengers on the bus got off one after another, and the senior students gathered in groups of 3 or 5 talking and laughing with each other. The new students are the most energetic group. They are like a group of little bees, always moving around in the crowd. After almost everyone had gotten off the train, Cedric and Karl, supporting the Weasley brothers, slowly walked down from the train. The two brothers' faces were pale, their legs were shaking constantly, and they looked completely terrified. He just stood on the platform with a tough face. George, who was standing next to him, stroked his heart and said tremblingly, "It's all fake. No need to be scared. I just think it's funny." "What about you, Fred?" "That's right. I'm not scared at all. I'm just a little nervous, that's all." Fred, who was asked, also forced a smile quickly, but with his pale face, that smile looked a little unsettling. Cedric looked at Carol helplessly and complained, "Your story has frightened them. I don't think they can even walk to the carriage now." "It's not my fault." Karl chuckled and shrugged his shoulders slightly, acting as if it was none of his business. "They were the ones who insisted on listening. I tried to end this horror storytelling session several times, but you saw that they refused." Hearing this, Cedric was also speechless. These two guys were trying to prove Gryffindor's courage in front of the freshmen. I half forced Karl to tell the American Horror Story for almost 3 hours. Coupled with Karl's amazing acting skills, even he felt scared several times. If he hadn't known some Muggle horror stories in advance. Knowing that the core of it is usually fictional and exaggerated, otherwise, his current state would definitely not be much better than those two brothers. But just when Cedric was about to complain to Karl, the two Weasley brothers, who had just barely stood up, became a little unhappy. George spoke up first. "You don't need to beg for mercy, Cedric. That's simply slander. How can a Gryffindor warrior be frightened by some fictional stories of Muggles?" Next up was Fred. "That's right. A brave Gryffindor will never be intimidated by these fictional stories. My dear Mr. Karl, you should join our academy and become one of the most courageous bunch." "What?" Cedric looked at the two brothers in surprise. "I said something good for you, but you wanted to pry my junior brother away." Although Hufflepuff doesn't have much desire for the House Cup, Cedric is just naive. He could also see that this freshman was definitely not an ordinary person. Moreover, he could use the Patronus charm now, so his magical talent was naturally needless to say. How could he give such an excellent person to Gryffindor? And the most important point is, whether you go to this carriage first to talk to the other person, or propose to make friends with the other person. He was the one who came here first, so why should he give up the place to these two annoying guys? So he quickly looked at Karl and said, "Don't listen to their nonsense. Hufflepuff is the best house. You will definitely make the most friends there. I give you my word." Seeing that the three people were about to quarrel over their college assignments, Karl had no choice but to come out and smooth things over. "Don't get excited, my friend. I think I have learned about the advantages and disadvantages of the two colleges through you three. So please stop arguing. As for scaring you, I'm very sorry, but now I think I'm going to leave." As he spoke, he pointed to the end of the station. A huge figure holding a lantern was staggering towards this side. First year students, come over here, all follow me." The huge voice shouted loudly, and the sound was like a huge bell in a church. Many freshmen looked at the other party's huge body. They couldn't help but feel a little scared and followed behind him trembling. Seeing this scene, Karl couldn't help but stroke his forehead with his hand. These little wizards are really brave. They are not afraid that the other party will kidnap them and sell them. However, seeing that the team was getting farther and farther away, he could only simply say goodbye to the three of them and hurriedly catch up. The three people who remained on the platform looked at each other, and finally Cedric smiled triumphantly. He supported the two brothers as they walked and spoke. "It seems that I should win. After all, among the three of us, I should be the best." Hearing this, the two brothers who were being supported twitched their cheeks wildly, but they really couldn't find a word to refute. I could only keep complaining in a low voice while letting the other person support me and walk forward. As for the freshman team, they passed through a steep and narrow path. It was pitch black on both sides, and the humid air made the road particularly muddy. Ouch. Karl, who was walking at the end of the team, suddenly heard the little wizard's cry of pain from the front, and he walked forward quickly. Then he saw a familiar figure, so he quickly helped the person up. Thank you. Hermione, who was helped up, thanked him quickly. When she saw that the person who helped her up was Karl, she couldn't help but feel a little surprised. But when she saw that her robe was covered with mud, her eyes turned red, and she was about to cry. Karl couldn't help but sigh, took out his wand, and recalled Professor Snape's spellcasting movements in front of the wand shop in the Memory Palace. Immediately replicate it perfectly. 1:1 with a gentle wave of the magic wand. Clean up. Suddenly, the dirt all over Hermione's body disappeared, and her robes became neat and tidy again. Thank you. Hermione lowered her head in thanks, and 2 red clouds floated on her little face again. Carol just smiled faintly, walked forward without looking back, and spoke in a low voice. No need to thank me. You have already thanked me many times, and apologized to me many times today, but don't cry so easily anymore, my dear Meanie. Who are you calling a stingy person? Hearing this, Hermione's face turned red with anger and she shouted loudly, but she looked up. But she saw that Karl had already left with the team. Looking at his back, Hermione stomped her feet angrily and hurriedly chased after him. Karl, who was walking at the back of the team, was feeling moved by the fact that he had done a good deed without leaving a name. That annoying voice in my mind sounded again. Congratulations to the host for playing with the feelings of an ignorant girl again. That's how it is, playing hard to get, only then does the true nature of a scumbag show. Villain's points increase by 10. Current points are 200. Fuck, what kind of bullshit is this? What a scumbag he is. He doesn't even like lolis. Okay, my XP has always been very stable. I always like sexier ladies with hot bodies. As for those naked lolis, I don't have any weird thoughts at all. But looking at the 200 points, Karl didn't argue. After all, 190 of them were earned in a way that was a bit dishonorable. Chapter 14 The Boat and the Sorting Tradition Horror Story. They walked like this for more than 10 minutes, and Cole was at the end of the whole group, while the angry Miss Beaver followed behind Karl. Until her head hit Karl's back. Oops. Hermione touched her head and cried out in pain. Why was this guy's back so hard, like a piece of iron? She wanted to argue with Carol again, saying that she was not a crying girl, but she heard a surprised wow. She quickly leaned over to look, and the scenery in front of her instantly attracted the girl's attention. At the end of the narrow path, there was a black lake. On the other side of the lake was a cliff with a magnificent castle standing there. With spires everywhere, and lights shining through the windows like stars. Hermione admired the beautiful Hogwarts castle. The mysterious and unknown atmosphere fascinated her. Karl only stopped for a short while and quickly looked away. If it were 7 to 8 years earlier, he might have been excited about the scene in front of him. But now, all this seemed insignificant in his eyes. No more than 4 people on each boat, until a loud roar woke up the intoxicated little wizards. Hagrid stood at the front of the team, pointing at the small boat anchored on the shore. He boarded a boat alone, but the boat was so pitiful that it sank significantly, which was visibly visible. One can't help but worry whether it can withstand the weight of the hybrid giant. Karl and Hermione were undoubtedly the last, so they were the only 2 people on the boat, and Miss Beaver was still sulking. Karl, however, looked at the lake nonchalantly. The water was sparkling, and the boat was gradually moving towards the castle. Both sides were silent for a long time, until the boat approached the cliff. Hagrid's roar was heard. Lower your head, Hermione hurriedly did as she was told, but Karl sat there motionless until the boat was completely through the vines. Hermione asked, a little angrily, as she straightened up, why didn't you listen? You should listen to the instructions of the staff at school. What if you encounter danger? Her words made Carol a little angry. He looked at her with caring eyes for the mentally retarded, and said without any taboo, my dear lady, even if the giant lies on the ground, he is probably taller than me. When I stand up, he can pass it. Why should I bow my head? And please don't lecture me. We just met today. There is no need to do so. Let me give you another sentence. Real knowledge must be tested through your own experiments. If you can't do that, then that knowledge is meaningless to you. Hermione opened her mouth, wanting to retort, but unable to say anything, so she had no choice but to hide away again, sitting there with her arms folded across her chest, sulking. Karl, however, looked indifferent and continued to look at the lake. He had no idea how his words would inspire the girl in front of him. He had no idea what kind of trouble his words would cause Professor McGonagall in the future. The only feeling he had now was that he felt a little uncomfortable. After all, no man wants to stay next to a sulking woman for too long, no matter how old she is. Fortunately, the boat quickly reached the shore, breaking the dam awkwardness, and some people followed Hagrid. Climbing up a flight of stone steps and gathering in front of the huge oak door. After counting the number of people, Hagrid raised his huge fist and knocked on the castle door 3 times. The door slowly opened, and a witch in an emerald green robe appeared at the door. Many freshmen felt a harsh oppression from the other party and were so scared that they dared not breathe. All the first years are here, Professor McGonagall. Thank you, Hagrid. Now leave it to me, Professor. McGonagall waved her hand to open the doors, and a group of young wizards immediately filed in. The hall was extremely bright and warm. There were burning torches on every corner of the wall, and everyone could hear a buzzing sound coming from the right point. But Professor McGonagall took them to a small house on the other side of the hall. Then he waved for everyone to be quiet. Welcome to Hogwarts. It's getting late, so the start of term dinner will begin soon, but before you enter the auditorium and take your seats, we first need to determine which college you will be entering. Professor McGonagall introduced in detail the 4 major colleges of Hogwarts, their glorious history, as well as the House Cup and the principles of adding and subtracting points. After the detailed introduction, Professor McGonagall left and said she would be back in 5 minutes. This period of time is reserved for the little wizards to sort out their clothes and adjust their mints. However, due to the professor's departure, the atmosphere on the scene became more tense, and some children from wizard families became more nervous. Immediately, they began to spread rumors about the sorting ceremony. The rumor began to spread at an alarming speed. In less than a minute, no one in the room was talking anymore and everyone was extremely nervous. Karl stood in the corner of the room, struggling in his heart. On the one hand, this was a good opportunity to gain points. On the other hand, there is really no sense of accomplishment in deceiving a group of children, and it may even make people feel guilty. Just when he was wavering, the system helped him make a decision, and a few words floated through his mind. Start your performance, host. Intimidate these young wizards and make them think about dropping out of school. Don't worry, don't forget that you are also a freshman, and there will naturally be someone to take the blame, since this is the host's first time acting in Hogwarts. So the villains' points are doubled. I'm sorry, Cedric. I'm sorry, George and Fred. Karl silently apologized to the 3 of them in his heart. Then he immediately began his performance. As the saying goes, the first time is a struggle, the second time is familiar. He had lost his moral constraints. First he kept rubbing his hands, then his expression became a little impatient, and he kept muttering to himself. His unique height and outstanding appearance are already very eye-catching, coupled with the little tail that always follows him. Hermione couldn't help but ask when she saw him like this, "What's wrong with you, Karl?" "I took the bait," Karl said nervously, deliberately raising his voice. "I'm preparing for the next test." This sentence immediately attracted the attention of everyone present, adding to the tension that was already pervasive around them. The little wizards immediately swarmed around Karl and started asking questions at once. Among them was a domineering boy with platinum hair with 2 followers. He swaggered past everyone and asked, "Do you know the content of the sorting ceremony assessment?" Looking at the other person's arrogant face, Karl recognized the other person's identity at a glance. Draco Malfoy. She is indeed good looking, but her expression is a little too annoying. Thinking of this, Karl's sense of morality suddenly dissipated a little. He deliberately lowered his voice, showing a frightened expression, and spoke slowly, while looking into Malfoy's eyes. "Yes, Cedric and the twins just told me about the sorting process in the car. I think some of you noticed that when the twins were about to get off the car, their legs were already weak with fear, because the memories were too cruel. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. Freshmen who were scared and dropped out. What is a perfect lie? It is an exaggeration and expansion of reality. Point. As soon as Karl finished speaking, Ron, who was standing next to Harry, quickly came out and exclaimed, "George and Fred, they are my brothers. They are fearless people in school. How could they be scared?" Perfect. Ron's words were a perfect assist. Karl didn't need to ask any more questions. He just needed to remind everyone present of their memories. So he asked slowly, "Do you think I'm lying? Although we were the last to get off the bus, I think some people present should have seen that scene." His words immediately aroused discussion among all the young wizards, and soon someone came forward to prove his point. I saw it with my own eyes. The Weirlight twins were so scared that their faces turned pale and their legs were shaking. They had to be helped out of the car with these continuous assists. All Karl had to do was to guide slowly, using the form of Cthulhu mythology. Slowly guide the fear of the unknown and the indescribable from the depths of everyone's hearts. As Karl spoke, the faces of the little wizards surrounding him became paler and paler, and the fear of the unknown made their legs tremble. The most pitiful one is Malfoy, because he not only has to listen to the whispers of the ancient gods, but also can appreciate Karl's superb performance. So much, so that in the end, his eyes rolled back, and he fell on his back on the ground. Malfoy's fainting was the last straw that broke the camel's back, and the whole situation went out of control in an instant. Many little wizards were so scared that they cried and shouted, "Mom, I want to go home." Ron also muttered to himself, "It's over." If this is the kind of test Fred and George, who recall being paralyzed with fear, are really courageous, Harry, on the side, also quickly added, "Yes, your brother is worthy of being a Gryffindor warrior, to be able to come back alive." Only Hermione, who was standing aside, refused to give up, and pulled at the corner of Karl's clothes. "You are lying to me, right? After all, I heard from some seniors that those two people are notorious troublemakers." What they say may not be completely credible. When faced with further questioning, Karl actually still felt a little ashamed towards the girl, whom he had deceived many times. So Ben wanted to tell the other person the truth secretly, but just when she was about to speak, that annoying voice sounded in her mind again. "What do you want to do, host? You are going to be a villain in the future. You are a gangster and a devil. How can you have mercy on a girl? Immediately release the special mission, the Road of Eternal Scumbag, to continue to play with the innocent girl's heart, cheat the other party, and make them want to drop out of school, and you will get 500 points as a reward." In the face of huge interests, the sense of morality began to slowly disappear, but Karl still insisted on his own opinion. "No, there is no sense of accomplishment in deceiving underage girls. It is not in line with my style. I have to ensure that my conscience is clear." "Really? That's really sad. When did you come up with such an extravagant idea? What do you know? I have my own persistence." "Well, what if it wasn't a lie? Everything you just said was essentially just a statement of a fact that happened. The reason why the other party doesn't believe what you say now is because the credibility of what the Weirlight brothers said is not very high. What if it's the Hogwarts version of someone else's kid, Cedric?" In his mind, Karl tried his best to deny this immoral thing, but the dog system did not refute it, and just guided him step by step. This last sentence left Karl unable to refute, and the system continued to guide him. "How about it? Did I ask you to lie?" "No, dear dog." "How is your conscience?" "Much better, thank you." After completing the self-loop of conscience logic, Karl immediately began his performance. He looked Hermione in the eyes and spoke very seriously. There were 3 people in the carriage at the time. In addition to the 2 Weirlight brothers, there was also a Mr. Cedric Diggory. You may not know him, but you just need to know that he is an absolutely excellent student in Hogwarts, a model student in the eyes of his parents. If you don't believe it, you can ask any classmate for confirmation. After hearing this, Hermione was so upset that she almost cried. She did not ask anyone else to confirm it. After all, in her impression point no one can look someone in the eye and tell a lie without batting an eyelid. Creak. 5 minutes later, the door of the room was pushed open and Professor McGonagall walked in as promised point. But the moment she stepped into the room, he felt something was wrong. Although the little wizards in the past were nervous, they would not be like this. They all looked pale and their hands and feet were shaking. They were not waiting to be sent to another hospital, but were clearly waiting to be beheaded. What's even more ridiculous is that the Malfoy kid is still lying on the ground, looking like he was frightened unconscious. Before she could open her mouth to ask, Hermione ran over and asked directly in a crying voice, "Is that right, Professor McGonagall? Can I choose to drop out?" Her words were like lighting the fuse of gunpowder, immediately triggering a chain reaction, and countless little wizards rushed to surround Professor McGonagall. I want to drop out of school too. Mom, where are you? I want to go home. Countless little wizards were crying and complaining at the same time. At the beginning, they could still speak well, but later they just started crying. You can imagine how loud it would be when dozens of children cry together. Professor McGonagall felt a little dizzy from the crying, and felt angry and nervous. Since the founding of Hogwarts, some students have been expelled, some have transferred to other schools, and some have even died inexplicably. But it never happened. An entire class of young wizards all clamored to drop out of school. If this gets out, Hogwarts' reputation in the wizarding world will be ruined. Just for this one incident, I will be laughed at for at least 1,000 years. Don't worry, kids. Speak slowly. What do you want to ask? Has anyone bullied you? Tell the professor and he will help you make the decision. Professor McGonagall tried hard to suppress the anger in her heart and tried her best to make herself look more harmonious, asking in a gentle voice. Under her comfort, the little wizards finally stopped crying and they spoke one after another in a very disorganized manner. Professor McGonagall spent a long time sorting out her thoughts before she finally understood what they meant. He roared angrily, "Whoever said the sorting ceremony would be dangerous? That's complete nonsense. How can we let you fight against monsters that you can't possibly fight against? Who is spreading rumors?" Swish, swish, swish. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to Karl, who was standing in the corner of the room. Karl remained unmoved, closing his eyes, as if he was enjoying beautiful music. The sound was indeed beautiful. In his mind, the voice of the dog system appeared from time to time, successfully intimidated 75 students, and made them express their intention to drop out of school. Points were doubled, and a total of 1,500 villain points were obtained. Successfully deceived an underage girl, and played with her heart, successfully obtaining 500 points. As soon as you entered school, you angered the vice principal. You are indeed a natural villain. You get 500 special points. Currently there are 2,700 points. Chapter 16 Karl, I'm also a victim 1. Professor McGonagall was already furious at this time. She walked over quickly and looked at Karl, who was standing there in a daze, and asked angrily, "Mr. Hohenzollern, how can you intimidate other students? This is a serious fraud." Faced with Professor McGonagall's angry questioning, Karl came back to his senses from the joy of his harvest. At the same time, he immediately thought of a countermeasure. Facing someone who was much higher in status than him, angry questioning and direct confrontation were obviously not an option. The best way is to make the other party feel ashamed, make him think that he has wronged him, and at the same time find someone to take the blame. So he immediately began his performance, first pretending to be stunned by the question, and then immediately changing his expression. He acted very innocent, even a little aggrieved. "Professor McGonagall, I didn't go looking for them, much less threaten them. I simply repeated to them what I heard. My original intention was to protect my classmates. At least it allows them to have basic preparation when facing the unknown." This trick was indeed very useful. Karl's confusing and god-level performance made Professor McGonagall, who was just so aggressive, have some self-doubt. I could only mutter, "Then you can't talk nonsense. Giant monsters, gals, and even monsters from the deep sea have all come out. You can't tell me that's what you heard, too." Seeing that the first step had been achieved, and Professor McGonagall's tone had wavered, Karl immediately took advantage of the opportunity to pursue the victory point. Start the second step immediately and start passing the buck. I didn't lie to you, Professor. This is exactly what I heard. That's what the senior said to me in the car at that time. Which senior? Professor McGonagall asked. Carol sneered in his heart. George Weasley and Fred Weasley. It's these two guys. Professor McGonagall shouted angrily the moment she heard the two names. Professor McGonagall's anger also helped Karl complete the third step. No evidence after death. After all, for some issues, once the suspicion is reached, the crime has already been established, and the angry Professor McGonagall will definitely not investigate the details. The blame has been firmly placed on the Weasley brothers. This perfect performance was immediately recognized by the system. Perfect blame shifting performance. Congratulations to the host for deceiving the professor again. Reward points 100. Current points 2800. Cole was enjoying the fruits of his victory, while Professor McGonagall was furious that such a talented pair had appeared in her own college. But now, she could only suppress her anger, turned around and told the students watching, and repeatedly assured them, that the sorting ceremony was absolutely safe. After 10 minutes of calming, the freshmen finally stopped the riot, but they still followed Professor McGonagall with lingering fear like a group of numb puppets. The team moved slowly until Karl, who was at the end of the line, felt as if he stepped on something. He quickly looked down and found that poor Malfoy had been stepped on by countless insensitive classmates, and his whole body was covered with shoe prints. Karl had no choice but to risk being deducted points to help the other person up from the ground, and shouted loudly to Professor McGonagall in front of him, "Professor, you seem to have forgotten a classmate. He is in a very bad state right now, Professor." McGonagall quickly turned around and saw Karl supporting Malfoy slowly following the team, and she immediately felt guilty. "I was wrong about what happened before, Mr. Hohenzollern. You are a very good child. You still remember to help your classmates at this time. After you have sorted your colleges, I will add 20 points to your college." "No, Professor. I don't deserve it," Karl said seriously. He was not lying. He really felt ashamed. After all, the whole thing was caused by him, but in the end he not only did not get punished, but was even rewarded. It's really shameful. But Professor McGonagall on the side did not allow it. She said righteously, "You don't have to be modest. Any classmate who does something kind should be praised. What happened before was not your fault. You don't have to feel ashamed, Professor." McGonagall's words were the final verdict on the matter, and Cole was instantly changed from a jerk who scared his classmates, having become one of the innocent victims. The classmates who had just glared at Karl now had more or less guilt on their faces. Cole was helpless. He could only modestly accept Professor McGonagall's praise, while listening helplessly to the voice of the dog system in my mind. "Too perfect, host. You have completely deceived everyone. You are simply a bastard among bastards and a villain among villains. This must be rewarded generously." The host's male charm attribute is increased by 1. And enable the personal panel attribute query permission in advance. Host, Karl Hohenzollern magic power. 1000. Using magic consumes magic power. For ordinary wizards, the initial magic power is usually around 150. Spell, Avada Kedavra, Demon Lord level usage. Cleaned. Perfect copy of Professor Snape. Defense against the dark arts. Patronus charm. Born with. Black magic. Not yet learned. Strongly condemned by the system. Transfiguration. Not yet learned potions. Not yet learned alchemy. Not yet learned. Talents. Attractiveness to women. 95 points. Absolute scumbag. Attractiveness to men. 85 points. You said well. The devil must be attractive to both men and women. God level abilities. Memory palace. God level performance skills. God level arm mastery. Overall, your talent is already top notch, but you are not bad enough. You will become the worst villain. Let's play with these idiots. Hearing that slightly perverted laughter, Karl felt sick all over. He watched his own male charm being destroyed. From 85 to 86. I broke through a small bottleneck, and the following notes also changed from "you will attract most men" to "the vast majority of men will begin to be interested in your appearance." What? The hell is this? Is this making me a pervert? But no matter how Karl greeted the family of the system in his mind, in reality, he still followed the pace of the large group of people. They quickly walked out of the room, crossed the hallway, and passed through the door on the other side. Finally we arrived at the Hogwarts Great Hall. The entire hall was extremely magnificent, with thousands of candles floating in the air. The entire auditorium was lit up as brightly as day. 4 long tables were placed side by side, and on a slightly higher step was a seat for the guest of honor. There was only one empty seat there, and the magical scenery around dispelled the fear in the hearts of most of the little wizards. They looked around curiously. The classmates around them, and the professor on the stage, were also observing them. Most of the students and professor smiled warmly, with only one exception. Professor Snape. His eyes were fixed on Karl, and for a fraction of a second, on Malfoy, who was supported by him, and whose body was covered in shoe prints. But no matter what, as the team slowly approached, Professor McGonagall placed a high stool on the steps in the center of the auditorium. Then a hat was placed on top. Chapter 17. His Majesty the Great Iron Hat King. The moment he saw the hat, Karl felt a strong sense of resistance in his heart. Because that thing was so dirty and different from what he remembered in his mind. After observing it closely, the entire hat was covered with greasy, dirty brown dirt, as if it had not been washed for 800 years, although it doesn't emit any unpleasant smell. Just looking at it gives people goosebumps. Professor McGonagall put her hat away and first focused a death glare on the twins from her own house. The 2 guys' faces, which had just regained a little color from the shock, turned pale again in an instant. At the same time, it was filled with confusion and innocence. Then Professor McGonagall slowly walked down the steps and stood in front of the freshmen. Then the hat suddenly jumped, split in the middle, and started singing like a human mouth. The old students were used to this, but the new students all looked surprised. A singing hat undoubtedly aroused the freshmen's interest in Hogwarts. Karl disagreed. After all, the voice was so hoarse and unpleasant that it was difficult to appreciate. However, the sorting hat only works once a year. The rest of the time, it is thinking about lyrics. So, even though the song was unpleasant to the ear and flopped, after the song ended, everyone in the auditorium still cooperated and gave applause. Okay, whoever's name I read out next will sit down with his hat on and wait for the results of the sorting, Professor McGonagall said. These words finally dispelled the concerns of the freshmen present, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Isn't it just a hat? What's so dangerous about it? Although the hat is so sloppy that many clean-loving little witches look at it with embarrassment. But compared to the tests Karl just mentioned, it was as easy as drinking water. Thinking of the scenes in Karl's story. The freshman couldn't help but feel fear and at the same time anger after being deceived. Oh no, Cole was also a victim. He did not deserve such an injustice. So many freshmen turned their resentful eyes to the 2 Weasley brothers, whom Professor McGonagall had just given a death stare to. Perfect operation, successfully portraying himself as a victim. Such a vicious and shameless act must be given extra points. Increase villain points by 300. Current points are 3000. Karl, who was standing at the end of the line, was just thinking about how to avoid putting that dirty hat on his head. In my mind, the voice of the dog system kept appearing. He was a little confused until Professor McGonagall's voice brought him back to reality. Hannah Abbott, a girl with pigtails, ran out from the team in a hurry. Karl's eyes also fell on this Iron Hat King. The little girl put the sorting hat on her head, and in less than a moment, the sorting hat made a decision. Hufflepuff. The table on the right immediately burst into excited applause, welcoming Hannah. Susan Burns, a shy and slightly plump girl, took over the relay. Hufflepuff. 2 lovely girls in a row were sorted into Hufflepuff, which undoubtedly made the little badgers very happy. Cedric even led the crowd in applauding. Karl stood aside and observed silently while thinking about which college he should be assigned to. Gryffindor is not a good choice because the students there are too impulsive and lively, which does not fit my style of doing things. Ravenclaw is not a good choice either. Although I like dealing with smart people, people who are too smart often have the common problem of intellectuals. They are too dogmatic. Slytherin is more directly excluded. Considering what you want to do and joining Slytherin, it almost has the word villain written on your face. After much thought, it seems that Hufflepuff is the best choice, although according to my memory, Hufflepuff is often described as the most mediocre house at Hogwarts, but they have great qualities. Just what Karl needed: kindness, meaning open to influence, and easy to manipulate. Enthusiasm means the convenience of organizing, not to mention fairness and perseverance. As long as they are guided, these two qualities can be used to one's advantage, such as adhering to the fairness he has established, and sticking to the principles he has established. Even mediocrity seems to have become an advantage at this moment. And to explain it from another perspective, mediocrity means having no individuality and being collectivist. This is the core foundation upon which an organization can be built. Then, while he was thinking, the number of freshmen continued to decrease through observation. Karl also discovered that the fewest students were assigned to Ravenclaw and Slytherin, especially Slytherin. Apart from that cocky little Malfoy and his two lackeys, no other student was assigned there. There are only 4 Ravenclaws. There were the most Hufflepuffs, and that was actually the case. There were still many empty seats at the long tables of other colleges, but the Hufflepuff tables were the only ones that were fully occupied. Based on the principle of coming from the masses and going back to the masses, Karl immediately decided to go to Hufflepuff. Hermione Granger. Finally, hearing a familiar name, Carroll raised his head slightly, and the girl almost trotted to the stool. He put on the hat in a hurry, perhaps with too much force, and almost stuffed his entire head into it. The hat seemed to be in a bad mood as well. It angrily blew out a stream of white smoke from its nostrils, and then shouted loudly, "Gryffindor." Just as I remembered the plot in my mind, Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor House, and after her, the heavyweight drama of this sorting began. Harry Potter, as Professor McGonagall called out the name, the auditorium, which had been noisy just now, immediately became quiet. Everyone's eyes were focused on the boy who was wearing glasses and looked shy and a little timid. Under the gaze of everyone, he slowly walked towards the chair. Even because he was too nervous from the moment I sat on the chair, I kept my eyes closed. What followed was a long wait, with Cole watching everything on the stage. Just like everyone else present. He knew that at this moment, this rosy-lipped and white-toothed savior was arguing with the Sorting Hat, asking him not to go to Slytherin House. However, due to the fragment of Voldemort's soul in his mind, the Sorting Hat has always insisted that, if he goes to Slytherin College, he will achieve great success. However, unlike what he expected, the waiting time this time seemed a little too long. Everyone waited anxiously for a full 10 minutes. And yet another Sorting Hat appeared in Hogwarts, a student whose sorting result the Sorting Hat could not decide after 5 minutes. You have to know that in the entire history of Hogwarts over this century, there have only been 2 hat jokes. One is Peter Pettigrew, the deceased recipient of the Order of Merlin, first class. The other one was Professor McGonagall, who was standing next to Harry. Everyone's expectations were filled to the brim until the Sorting Hat opened its mouth wide and shouted loudly, "Gryffindor." There was a dead silence in the hall at first, and then the Weasley twins and other students shouted at the Gryffindor table. The roof of the auditorium was almost blown off. After this sensation, the subsequent placement of freshmen was rather cold, except for the polite applause from the respective colleges to which they were assigned. Basically, the students' attention has been attracted by the food on the table. Until there was only one person left in the entire group of freshmen. Professor McGonagall didn't even read out the list, because Karl's name was not on the list at all. After putting away the parchment scroll with the new students' names, Professor McGonagall shouted loudly with a slightly complicated expression, "Karl Hohenzollern. Chapter 18 Aran-039, Gentle, 039, Exchange with the Sorting Hat." On the way to the Sorting Hat, Karl actually felt a little worried. After all, he has too many secrets: his identity as a time traveler, the existence of the system, and his past, that he doesn't want anyone to discover. Each of these is a shocking secret. Once people find out, it won't end well for me. Just as he was about to walk in front of the chair, the voice of the dog system sounded again. "How can the host be so cowardly and forget the role we need to play? We are the devil, the absolute villain. You think you can control our branch with just a shabby hat? This is a joke. I'm issuing an emergency mission. You lead the results of the division. Mission rewards 100% soul reading and mind reading shielding. Hearing this, Karl showed a rare smile of relief. This system is very considerate. With this reward point he will be able to deal with Dumbledore and other wizards who were good at legilimency with much ease point. But he was still worried. After all, although the reward was tempting, preparation was still necessary. So he asked carefully in his mind, can the sorting hat really see through my heart? After all, it was created by the 4 founders, so I still need to respect it. Don't worry, host. The 4 founders don't have that kind of perverted desire. The sorting hat can only see through people's most superficial memories. So as to make a simple analysis, and even if he can see through your heart, don't worry, don't forget that your memory is now a palace. After getting a positive reply, Karl sat calmly on the chair, suppressed his nausea, and put the dirty hat on his head. Then he followed Harry's example and slowly closed his eyes, to prevent people around from seeing his inner thoughts. Soon, in Karl's memory palace, where is this place? What kind of magic is this? The sorting hat let out 2 exclamations, looking at the gorgeous decorations around it, and the palace, that seemed to stand in the starry sky, and kept moving. Even the sorting hat, which has existed for nearly 1,000 years, is in a state of brain shutdown at this moment. This is the memory palace in Karl's mind, which can also be simply understood as his consciousness space. The moment he put on the sorting hat, it instinctively wanted to explore his memory, and he took the opportunity to drag it to this place. Don't be nervous. Karl smiled slightly. In this memory palace, he felt like he was in a dream. He could change the reality of this consciousness space at will, so he snapped his fingers lightly. The memory palace changed immediately, and the sorting hat floating in the air slowly landed on the luxurious leather sofa beside it. Cole was sitting opposite it, staring at it with a smile. The sorting hat was completely confused by this action, but it still spoke with a temper. Boy, you are beyond my imagination. I feel a different aura from you. You should not belong to Hogwarts, but Headmaster Dumbledore asked me to sort you into Gryffindor. So far, you are indeed very courageous. Let me leave this space immediately, otherwise I will shout Azkaban. Hearing this, Cole was silent for a moment. He didn't expect that he would attract Dumbledore's attention as soon as he entered the school. At the same time, he began to recall how he was caught for deliberately using magic, and how he threatened Cornelius Fudge to make him give false testimony. The journey to get myself to Hogwarts seemed a little too smooth, and I always felt like I was taking a back door. Now it seems that the back door he took was the headmaster of Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore. Only he has such a strong influence. But why does the other party do this? What is his purpose? Just when Cole was silent, the sorting hat became unhappy and started yelling. The noisy noise affected Karl's thinking, and he didn't like it. Karl stood up silently and picked up the sorting hat from the sofa beside him. Then he waved his hand casually, and a large drum washing machine suddenly appeared. Karl turned the handle on the washing machine. He adjusted the washing machine's mode to super high speed spin drying, then opened its lid and prepared to throw the sorting hat in. Hey, stop it now. You have such a dark heart. Even if I said something wrong, shouldn't you have said something back? Why are you ready to attack right away without even getting angry? Looking at the high-speed whirlpool in the washing machine, the sorting hat immediately shouted loudly. However, Karl brought the other person in front of him, stared at him with his beautiful blue eyes, and showed an angelic and gentle smile. I don't like anyone to disturb me when I'm thinking. You only have one chance now. Tell me immediately what Dumbledore's purpose is in having you sort me into Gryffindor. Otherwise, I'll tell you to stay in this washing machine and sober up. After saying that, he slowly placed the sorting hat at the entrance of the washing machine, slowly lowering it to a higher altitude while continuing to speak gently. And I believe you can see that this space is in my mind, so all the dimensions here are, everything can be controlled by me, including time. The longest record of the branch is 15 minutes. I can extend these 15 minutes to 1500 years in this space. If you also want to wash 15 centuries, you can keep quiet. The Sorting Hat was completely muggle, and the gap in the middle of the hat was so wide open that it took a long time to close. It was not until the corner of his hat touched the whirlpool in the washing machine that he started screaming, "Wait a minute, I'll tell you the truth. I don't know either. Dumbledore can only communicate with me in a simple way. I really don't know anything. I swear in the name of my creator, Gryffindor, let me go immediately. You're a devilish little brat who's worse than Voldemort." The Sorting Hat's loud howling made Karl extremely annoyed. He simply swung it hard and threw it heavily onto the sofa beside him. Then he conjured up a sink in the space and washed his hands carefully while speaking without any scruples. "Okay, I'll trust you for now. Let's skip this question for now. I only have one request for you now. I hope I can be sorted into Hufflepuff House." The Sorting Hat, which had rolled around on the leather sofa for several rounds, rejected the request without hesitation upon hearing it. "No, I have my principles. You are too dangerous, little brat. You cannot enter Hogwarts. I will rot here today. Even if I rot in this magical space of yours, I will never give in like you. The courage of Gryffindor will always be with me." The words that were about to be threatening were suddenly stuck, because in front of the Sorting Hat, a large-scale top hat art launch event in the Muggle world took place. Carol projected various luxury brands onto the curtain of the space, including Chanel, LV, and Balenciaga. There are countless novel designs, countless special fabrics, and countless unique maintenance methods. The Sorting Hat was so dazzling that even this old wizard with 1,000-year experience in magic was dazzled. Karl just smiled slightly, looked at the Sorting Hat, which was already in a trance, and said lightly, "I didn't hear what you just said. I have principles in my life and work. As long as you agree to my request just now, everything you see now can become a reality. I promise you, as long as you nod, I will send the sample to you by owl tomorrow. So, could you please repeat what you just said?" Without waiting too long, the Sorting Hat slowly came to its senses and immediately spoke in a humble tone that had never appeared before. "Of course, I'm here to serve the little wizard. I just said that you can read the hat very accurately." Chapter 19 Hufflepuff. It's been too long. This is what everyone in the auditorium feels now. A full 20 minutes have passed. The Sorting Hat never gave Karl's sorting result. The auditorium was originally quiet due to fatigue and hunger. At this moment, people began to get restless and started discussing which college Cole would be assigned to. The two Weasley brothers, of course, hoped that the other would be sorted into Gryffindor. After all, Karl had an incredible talent for pranks. If I were assigned to another college, it would be a waste of talent. Malfoy also hoped that the other party would be sorted into Slytherin, even though the other party was not a pure-blood wizard, but he had heard from his father that he was the surname Hohenzollern is particularly noble in the Muggle world, and he had heard the other party's name from his father before. It is said that he has considerable influence in the wizarding world, and his father has been busy with the Wizard Cornucopia Financial Fund recently. He owns shares of the other party, and is said to be the major shareholder. He's handsome, rich, and of noble birth. He's also helped me a lot. It's not impossible to make an exception and allow him to join Slytherin. The little witches of Ravenclaw also look forward to Karl joining their college. After all, he is a cute little brother like an angel. The sisters still want to show some love. As for Hufflepuff, aside from Cedric, not many people seemed to care. As the little badgers grew hungrier, their eyes were fixed on the food. What a genius branch. It's not as important as having a meal. Finally, after half an hour of waiting, the Sorting Hat suddenly shouted loudly, "Hufflepuff!" There was a dead silence followed by a uniform exclamation. The entire auditorium was in an uproar. Even the professors on the stage began to whisper to each other. Everyone was surprised at this result. Professor Snape was particularly shocked and looked at Dumbledore, who was even more surprised. Looking at Karl, he took off his hat and nodded to him before running towards the Hufflepuff table. Dumbledore could only respond with an awkward smile and at the same time made a decision in his heart. After returning to the headmaster's office, be sure to have a good talk with the Sorting Hat, warm and friendly, this way. Cedric stood up and greeted them enthusiastically. The Hufflepuff classmates, though shocked, gave Karl a warm round of applause. A classmate even made room for him so that he could sit with Cedric. As soon as he sat down, Cedric immediately spoke excitedly. "You are amazing. You always exceed my expectations. You lasted for a full half hour and broke the highest record of Hogwarts in 1,000 years. So, how long did it take you?" Karl asked curiously. "Me? Less than 3 seconds. I remember I just put the hat on and the sorting hat called out Hufflepuff." Karl gave a thumbs up, looked at the complacent Cedric, and praised him. "That's amazing. You really are the fastest man in Hogwarts." Of course, the two of them were communicating passionately, but the Hufflepuff classmates beside them were much colder. But it's not because they were not enthusiastic, it's just that they all hugged their stomachs and stared at the food in front of them with one eye shining. The other eye was fixed on the principal on the stage, waiting for the other party's order to start spinning immediately. Dumbledore stood up with a smile on his face, seemingly not bothered by what happened before, and opened his arm, shouted happily, "Welcome, everyone, to Hogwarts. We have welcomed many lovely new students, although one of them surprised everyone, but there is nothing more joyful than being together with you. Before the banquet begins, I have a few final words to say. Please bear with me for a moment. That's it, idiot, cribberby, scum, twist, thank you all." As soon as Dumbledore sat down, the hall burst into applause. Karl, who was sitting in his seat, could guarantee that the applause this time was sincere, at least for the Hufflepuff students. The students pounced on the food in front of them like hungry wolves pouncing on a flock of sheep. You have to know that due to the presence of Harry Potter and Karl, this sorting ceremony can be said to be the longest in history. After nearly 2 hours of waiting, the little badger's eyes were already glowing with excitement. Roast beef, roast chicken, honey glazed pork chops, braised lamb chops, British sausages, mashed potatoes, French fries, and honey pudding. There are also various vegetables, gravy, sauces, and even mince to relieve the greasiness. It is really thoughtful. The wide variety of dishes is definitely a rich variety for the UK, which is known as a food dessert. Even Cole was shocked, but just when he picked up a grilled chicken leg dipped in sauce and was about to enjoy it. In my mind, that annoying voice sounded again. "Congratulations to the host. You have completed the task of leading your own branch and are awarded with 100% soul reading shielding. At the same time, the main task of the next stage is released, the Devil in the Academy, in the next learning process. As long as the host violates school rules, insults professors, and tortures classmates, he will receive corresponding points as rewards, including but not limited to torture of the soul, exploitation of the wallet, and tremendous mental pressure." Looking at the text in his mind, Carol's face twitched rapidly, and this time he had no intention of being a good person. So he retorted bluntly, "Isn't this a bit too much? If I continue like this, my reputation will probably be worse than Voldemort's." Wrong. The Demon King that the host wants to become is definitely not the kind of psychopath who only uses violence. It must be a well-rounded bad guy, just like what he did before. He did bad things and someone else took the blame. It would be best if the victim thanked you. If so, it will trigger a double reward and let these people see your true colors. Go and exploit them ruthlessly. Hehe. Seeing that the dog system had gone completely crazy, Karl didn't want to argue, but just woke up silently in his mind. Using the memory palace, he automatically blocked out the perverted laughter and then began to enjoy his food. At the same time, I also began to consider how to complete the tasks of the dog system. Yes, criticism is still necessary, but after the criticism, things still have to go on as they should. However, the suggestions made by the dog system and the torture of the soul are a bit too perverted. The huge mental pressure seemed to make him feel a little bit unbearable. After choosing and choosing, it seems that there is only one choice left, and that is the exploitation of the wallet. Just as he was thinking about something, a soft voice pulled him back to reality. "Mr. Hohenzollern, could you get me 2 milk puddings?" Karl turned his head and saw the Iron Hat King, who was sitting one seat away, staring at him eagerly. He quickly handed the pudding to the other party like a gentleman and said with a smile, "Just call me Karl. You're cute, Hannah. These Words made the little girl's face turn red all of a sudden, and her two pigtails swung back and forth, making her look very cute. After taking the pudding with both hands, he immediately started eating it like an ostrich. Tease the ignorant girl, add 10 points. Chapter 20, The Courtesan and the Scapegoat. Okay, that's how we play it, eh? My gentlemanly behavior was defined in such a dirty way. Feeling insulted, Karl fiercely criticized the dog system for this behavior, but there was no sign of stopping the actions of their hands. With the Iron Hat-Head King taking the lead, many Hufflepuff junior and senior students they began to deliberately ask him for food, adhering to the 3 principles of not taking the initiative, not refusing, and not taking responsibility. Karl responded enthusiastically to all requests, adding to his 90+ charm towards women. These actions have undoubtedly achieved very good results. Points +10. Points +20. The dog system's voice continued to sound, and the number of people asking him for help also began to increase. Even many seniors and juniors deliberately asked him to pass the food to them. At first, Karl refused this request. After all, this is Britain. Besides, his masculine charm of 86 always made him feel uneasy. However, Cedric seemed to want to join in the fun. He was sitting next to him, but he spoke in a pretentious manner. "Oh, dear Mr. Hohenzollern, could you bring me a roast lamb chop?" Karl rolled his eyes and glared at the other person, then moved the plate of grilled lamb chops from in front of him to in front of Cedric with his hands. The white porcelain plate only moved less than 10 centimeters, but it also completely ended Karl's reason for ejecting other boys, so he became the busiest person at the entire Hufflepuff table, constantly distributing various foods to everyone present. This action undoubtedly attracted the attention of many people. Dumbledore, who was sitting at the chief's seat, smiled very happily. He deliberately turned his head to look at Professor Snape, and said with a smile in his eyes, "I would say he is a good kid. You can see him interacting with all his classmates in a friendly and enthusiastic manner within a few moments." Professor Snape snorted disdainfully, with a sour tone in his voice. "It is the stupidest thing to do meaninglessly, and to make friends with stupid people." Karl was of course unaware of their conversation, just as he was also unaware of what was happening at the Gryffindor table nearby. Hermione was angrily using a dinner knife to cut the steak in front of her, and the steak knife was rubbing against the plate. There were bursts of harsh noises, which made Harry at the side couldn't help but remind them, "Hermione, this beef is dead. You don't have to use so much force." Soon after, Ron, holding a chicken drumstick in each hand, followed quickly. "That's right, it's just a meal. Is there any need to be so fussy? Eat your chicken leg." Hermione suddenly yelled, picked up a chicken leg, and ran straight to Ron's face. He thrust the chicken leg directly into Ron's mouth with such force that it nearly pierced his trachea. Cough. Cough. Ron was choked, coughed twice, scratched his head in confusion, and did not blame Hermione. He put the chicken leg directly into his mouth, savored it for a while, and then finished it. Finally he looked at Harry in confusion. "It's delicious. Why is she angry?" In response to this, Harry could only shake his head in confusion. After all, in his eyes, there should be nothing more important than eating. The banquet lasted for nearly an hour. After the last batch of desserts was distributed, Carol then returned to his seat, looked at the dessert in front of him, took a bite, and quickly put it down. "How can it be so sweet?" He spat out the honey cake in his mouth, finding it a little hard to believe the feeling on his tongue. "This honey cake tastes like eating frosting. Who would like this taste?" Just as he was complaining in his heart, all the food slowly disappeared, and Dumbledore stood up for the second time. The satisfied little wizard also made the auditorium quiet again. They all looked up, waiting for the principal's final lecture. But before Dumbledore could speak, Professor McGonagall suddenly spoke loudly. "Wait a moment, Albus. I have something else to take care of before you speak." Dumbledore was obviously stunned for a moment, but this had never happened before. but he looked at Professor McGonagall's face. He quickly smiled gently and gestured with his hand, letting Professor McGonagall speak first. Although Dumbledore is the headmaster of Hogwarts, everyone knows that Professor McGonagall is the one who is in charge. Especially when the other person shows a serious expression on his face. Even the principal has to temporarily avoid the confrontation. Professor McGonagall exclaimed immediately, "Mr. George Weasley, Mr. Fred Weasley, starting tomorrow, you will be here every evening at 8 o'clock. You all have to report to Filch and wipe all the trophies in the trophy room 3 times. You also have to copy down your glorious student deeds 3 times. The twins, whose complexion had finally improved a little because of the delicious food, were stunned at first, then stood up suddenly. He looked at Professor McGonagall in disbelief. "Why, we didn't do anything, Professor McGonagall." The 2 men's eyes were full of confusion and grievance. They were extremely unlucky today. First, they were frightened to the point of weakness in their legs by the horror story told by Carol. Now they are being punished for no reason. No, they must argue today. So George took the lead in explaining, "Please, believe us, Professor McGonagall, we absolutely did not. Absolutely nothing." Professor McGonagall asked calmly at first, and then her tone suddenly became stern. "Who told you to make up that kind of story and intimidate the new freshmen? It almost caused serious consequences, and you still want to explain? Okay, I'd like to hear your explanation." Hearing this, the Weasley brothers immediately focused their attention on Karl at the Hufflepuff table. With just a little thought, they both knew who was behind the incident. But looking at Karl's handsome and somewhat cute face, I recalled his actions just now at the Hufflepuff table. The Weasley twins were in despair. Although they had now deduced the truth of the matter, the truth no longer mattered. After all, he is a model student who can get along well with all his classmates. As soon as he is assigned to the college. On the other side, there are bad students who have already gained a bad reputation and, in Professor McGonagall's eyes, only like to play pranks. Even if they tell the truth now, what's the point? Will Professor McGonagall believe it? Moreover, Professor McGonagall's next words directly killed their thoughts on explanation. Professor McGonagall's eyes gradually became gentle after being angry, and she spoke with some pride. "Although a lot of strange and infuriating things happened today, I'm still very happy today, because among this class of freshmen there is one with the best character, Mr. Karl Hohenzollern. He helped selflessly before the sorting ceremony, Mr. Draco Malfoy, so I will add 20 points to Hufflepuff." Chapter 21 Honest Boy and 039, Karl, 039. Human nature is evil. This is the strongest feeling in the hearts of the Weasley brothers right now. After Professor McGonagall announced the extra points for Hufflepuff, almost all the students, including the professor, gave Karl a warm round of applause. The Hufflepuff students were extremely excited, and Cedric even lifted Karl up so that he could better enjoy the applause. As 2 of the 4 students who stood up, the Weasley twins, felt mixed emotions. Karl frantically signaled to Cedric to put him down quickly, but it was not because he was shy. It was because he was afraid that showing off too much would remind the Weasley twins of something. But how could Cedric listen to it? Hufflepuff had been suppressed by the other 3 major houses in the school for long enough. He absolutely could not let go of such an opportunity to show off. Sure enough, the Weasley twins soon noticed Cedric and decided to die together. He immediately spoke loudly to Professor McGonagall. "Professor, we admit everything you just said, but we are a little dissatisfied. We were in the carriage at that time. Besides the 2 of us and Karl, there is a 4th person." As they spoke, the 2 brothers turned their heads at the same time and looked at Cedric, who seemed to realize something, with a smug smile on his face. "His name is Cedric Diggory." This remark caused the whole audience to become restless again. No way. How could Cedric do such a thing? That's right. He wouldn't be that boring. This matter definitely has nothing to do with him. That's right. The Weasley twins must be lying. The students discussed the matter one after another, and most of them did not believe that Cedric would do such a thing. Professor McGonagall, who had just added points to Hufflepuff, also looked a little embarrassed and at a loss for a moment. It was the fat Mrs. Sprout who looked at Cedric gently and asked slowly, "Mr. Diggory, would you please answer this question? At this time, Karl, who had been put back in his position by Cedric, was desperately pulling at the corner of the other party's clothes, signaling the other party not to admit it. But this honest big boy still nodded slowly. Yes, Professor. I was there too. It was difficult to persuade a ghost who wanted to die with kind words, so Karl could only stroke his forehead with his hand. Mrs. Sprout spoke directly. Well, if that's the case, then you can go and help as well. Now, everyone was speechless, and Professor McGonagall simply waved her hand, signaling everyone to be quiet. Okay. Dumbledore spoke now, but he still had a smile on his face. You guys are more energetic than I thought, but I'm still having fun. I saw so many good qualities tonight. It includes being helpful and honest enough to admit mistakes. When he said this, even Carol's old face blushed, which was rare to be seen. However, I still want to give you a few reminders. First years, please pay attention to the forest outside the school grounds. No students are allowed to enter. Our old classmates should also remember this. His bright eyes swept across the entire venue, and he stopped specifically at Karl Point, but he was currently thinking about how to empty the wallets of his classmates, and didn't notice it at all. This made Dumbledore feel a little regretful, but he soon continued with a smile. Also, Mr. Filch asked me to remind everyone not to perform magic in the corridors during class breaks, as for the review work that everyone here is most concerned about. It will also be held in the second week of this semester. Any students who would like to volunteer to join the team can contact Ms. Huoki. As he spoke, his tone suddenly tightened, and he spoke quite seriously. Finally, I must tell everyone that anyone who doesn't want to encounter an accident and die a painful and tragic death, please do not enter the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. Carol's eyes twitched when he heard this. This was simply a case of trying to cover up one's own guilt. Sure enough, after Dumbledore finished speaking, those little lions were already rubbing their hands in preparation. Even the Weirlightwings who had just been punished were no exception. Well, before everyone goes to bed, let's sing the school song together, Dumbledore shouted, and all the teachers and students stood up. There was a chaotic dance in the hall, and Dumbledore used magic to conjure up the lyrics, but there was no music score, and all the singing was left to the students to improvise freely. With unpleasant noise coming from all directions, Karl had to use his memory palace to block out the noise around him, and slowly follow the lip sync point after the disastrous performance. Dumbledore was so moved that he wiped his moist eyes. This is the power of music. I feel the love in it. Okay, kids, it's bedtime now. Let's go back to the dormitory. In fact, it was already very late and the young wizards had already felt tired. If it weren't for these special dramas, I'm afraid many people have already fallen asleep. The senior students immediately ran away in a swarm, while the class leaders organized the freshmen to stand in line and prepared to lead them back to the lunch. Cedric took the initiative to take on this responsibility and stood at the head of the entire Hufflepuff team. Carol stood behind him, walking and speaking unhappily. Why did you just admit that you were in the carriage at the time? This will make my plan seem imperfect. When Cedric heard this, he first looked back at Carol in surprise and then smiled helplessly. You don't look like a Hufflepuff at all. You should be sorted into Slytherin, but since you can say that, it means you dare to admit that you were the one who led this matter. Carol shrugged indifferently and said indifferently, you are being too sentimental. I'm not being honest. Besides, everything I said before was based on facts. If you don't believe me, you can go ask the freshmen. Am I right? Hannah, the girl with pigtails, was standing behind Karl at this time, eavesdropping on their conversation, and heard the other party talking about herself. The girl stuck out half of her head and kept nodding. Cedric then realized that Carol seemed to be worse than he thought. After asking for the specific details, his face twitched as he spoke with great certainty. I take back what I said. You should definitely be sorted into Slytherin. The sorting hat may have been left out for too long. It's already a bit broken. That's why you were sorted into Hufflepuff. Hearing this, Karl smiled and patted Cedric on the shoulder. Walking side by side with him, he deliberately lowered his voice pretending to be planning something bad. Yes, it was because of the special means I used that the damn hat sorted me into Hufflepuff. I'm a very bad person, so you have to be careful, but I've just been sorted into Hufflepuff, which brings extra points to the house. What should I do? Do you want to tell the truth, dear senior? Cedric stopped talking and remained silent for a long time, until he led the team to the door of the Hufflepuff common room. He deliberately imitated Carol, patted the other person's shoulder, and spoke in a low voice. You are really scary, little brother. What should I do? I can only reluctantly put you under my nose and keep a close eye on you. Okay, stop joking. You'll be an excellent Hufflepuff. Welcome to join us, Karl. Having said that, he shook hands with Carol, then turned and walked towards the door with a smile. Cole was very helpless, and at the same time the guilt in his heart completely disappeared. After all, it was not that he did not tell the truth, but that they did not believe him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22. The First Partner and Subordinates. The Hufflepuff common room is located in the school's basement, with the entrance located in a pile of large barrels on the right side of the kitchen corridor. Simply tap the second barrel in the middle of the second row to Helga Hufflepuff's rhythm and the lid will spin around to reveal the passage point. Compared to Gryffindor and Slytherin, with their constantly changing passwords and Ravenclaw's brain teasers that sound like IQ tests, Hufflepuff's style of doing things always reveals the kind of laziness and practicality that workers love the most. A password has been used since Hogwarts was founded and is never changed. However, even with such a simple password, no outsider has ever entered the Hufflepuff common room. Because this is the only college with a face recognition function, even if an outsider gets the rhythm right. But as long as it is not a badger, the gate will not open, and all kinds of strange smelling vinegar will be sprayed out from the wooden barrel next to it to drive away the invaders. Cedric patiently explained these contents to the freshmen and demonstrated them personally 3 times before leading the freshmen through the door of the lounge. Karl ducked down and walked through the passage. Looking inside, he saw a huge round room. The common room has a low ceiling, a moderate temperature, and no luxurious decorations, but it exudes comfort everywhere. Various plants can be seen hanging or placed everywhere around the room, and the fresh air is filled with the scent of plants. The entire public lounge feels like an oxygen bar in the forest. There are soft carpets underfoot and plenty of plush sofas and chairs. Karl nodded with satisfaction, and Cedric was also very happy. He walked slowly to the fireplace and pointed at the portrait hanging above it. It was a lady holding a golden cup and smiling brightly. Cedric said proudly, "This is Miss Helga Hufflepuff. Because of her kindness, she adopted many house elves to protect them from abuse and humiliation. So Hufflepuffs always get special treatment in the kitchen. So, if you need any food, you can go to the kitchen next door and get it yourself. Don't be polite to them." It can be seen that Cedric is full of pride in his academy, but after he finished speaking, in order to avoid his kind-hearted classmates from doing bad things out of good intentions, Karl added, "This guy meant it literally, for special reasons. In the eyes of the house elves, your politeness means that they have not done their job well, and they will blame themselves extremely. So, please control your good conscience and don't do things that you will regret because of your good intentions." Karl's words marked the end of the entire speech. Cedric also expressed his agreement and then let everyone start to move freely. The Hufflepuff students were all very enthusiastic, and at the beginning of the free activities, there were many senior students. They warmly entertained the new students and took out snacks hidden from all kinds of incredible places to entertain them. When faced with questions raised by freshmen, they would answer them patiently, make jokes from time to time, and after livening up the atmosphere, they would share their own experiences. Karl also sat on the sofa with Cedric and started staring at each other. It can be seen that Cole was very upset about Cedric admitting that he was also in that carriage, which made his plan imperfect. At the beginning, Cedric was very confident and looked at the other person with a firm look. But what Karl is best at is silent cold violence and the ability to express with his eyes. In less than a minute, Cedric was defeated and raised his hands in surrender. Okay, I know you're a little angry now, but honesty is a good virtue, and you have to admit that. Besides, you are the biggest beneficiary of this whole thing. Why do you have to pursue perfection like this? As for the two wheel-eye guys, you don't have to worry about them holding a grudge against you. They should be happily discussing your perfect prank right now. You are really worthy of being like this. How can you be so considerate of others? Watching this handsome boy apologize to you. Karl had to give a thumbs up in his heart, and at the same time he very much approved of his own choice. Hufflepuff was indeed his best choice. After all, if you were to ask what group of people villains feel most comfortable among, it would undoubtedly be among a group of good people. His sense of morality had completely disappeared today, and he apologized to Cedric only for the sake of others without any sense of guilt. She picked up the hot juice brought by the senior student and said quietly, "Since you admit your mistake, I will graciously forgive you, but as Professor McGonagall said, if you do something wrong, you must be punished. My punishment is very simple. From today on, you will be my subordinate and best business partner. I won't interfere with your studies and life, but when necessary, you must obey my orders." Cedric was obviously stunned for a moment, and he looked at Karl in disbelief. Looking at the biggest beneficiary of the whole prank and the murderer who really should be punished, he could be so nonchalant. He said he wanted to punish me and make me his subordinate. All I did was apologize, and it was like selling myself out to him. Even Li Zantang in the Far East might not agree to such harsh conditions, so he shook his head desperately. "No, your condition is too harsh. I will never compromise with power. I'll take part in all my pranks from now on." Before Cedric could finish his words, Karl interrupted leisurely. "Make a deal." It was so smooth, just so smooth. After Carol gave the conditions, Cedric agreed to Carol's request without a moment's hesitation. Carol looked at this handsome boy with red lips and white teeth indifferently. He was indeed a combination of white and black. He stood up slowly, picked up the hot juice beside him, and poured a glass for himself and Cedric. Then he raised his glass and said this with a sense of ceremony. "Welcome to join my organization, my outstanding senior. You will gain wealth, honor and everything you want from me." "Of course, boss." Cedric also raised his glass and said, "I believe that our great organization will be able to change Hogwarts in the future, make Hufflepuff great again." He was only half joking when he said this. In fact, he thought Cole was a very interesting person from the beginning. In addition to being amazed at the other party's stories and performance skills, he was also amazed at the other party's pranks. In fact, in his heart he also wanted to participate in these things, but due to his personality, he couldn't do it independently, so he took it for granted. Consider Karl's organization to be a purely mischievous student fraternity like the Weasley twins, but what he would never know was that what Karl said about wealth, glory and everything he wanted was the literal meaning of his words when two handmade ceramic teacups with strange shapes touched each other. The history of Hogwarts was completely changed at that moment. Chapter 23. Excessive masculine charm causes trouble. After Karl and Cedric finished drinking this special cup of wine, the number of people in the common room began to gradually decrease. Karl also returned to his dormitory through the round door, inheriting the style of the common room. Hufflepuff's student dormitory is also spacious and comfortable, with rooms of nearly 100 square meters. There are only 4 beds, each separated by a desk and a wardrobe, which ensures independence, while ensuring that everyone has enough space. Due to the special circumstances of Karl's joining Hogwarts, he had no roommate, and he lived alone in the entire dormitory. Although it may seem a bit lonely, the good thing is that I don't have to worry about being disturbed by my roommates when I do something. In a very good mood, he lay down on the bed and shouted loudly at the ceiling, "Move away the extra beds and furniture. I have other uses for them." After He finished shouting, silver lights flashed, and the extra beds and furniture disappeared out of thin air instead. There were some fresh plants, which Cole was very satisfied with. He knew that this was the magic of the house elves, so he deliberately didn't say thank you, but just lay there thinking about how he could empty his classmates' wallets. Just when he was about to fall asleep, that annoying voice rang out again. Congratulations to the host, you have gained your first male subordinate. Your male charm increased by 1. Your male charm is now 87. Please keep up the good work. When your male charm exceeds 90, the host will be able to make men fall in love with you wholeheartedly. Listening to those perverted words, Carol was truly helpless and frantically greeted the system's family point. This is Britain, after all, and 87% of male charm is a bit too dangerous. September. On 9nd is the first day of school. Carl got up early and stayed alone in the dormitory, enjoying the pleasure brought by nicotine. After a quick wash, he came to the common room. Before he had to wait long, Cedric appeared, rubbing his sleepy eyes. As soon as he saw Carol, he looked at the other's face in surprise, looked him up and down, and then stretched out his right hand, as if possessed by a ghost. Trying to get close to Carl's face, snapped, with a crisp sound. Carol gently gave the other person a big slap in the face, then tightened his collar, and looked at the other person with a strange expression. Dear Mr. Diggory, although we should be considered friends now, you are up so early in the morning, just about to touch my face. What on earth do you want to do? Cedric, who was slapped, rubbed his right cheek aggrievedly. He wanted to be angry, but he thought about what he had just wanted to do to Carol. She couldn't help but blush with shame, and said with evasive eyes, I don't know why, but I think you look more handsome than yesterday. There's a special attraction to you, especially your skin. Why does it appear so white and delicate? Hearing this, Carl's face began to twitch wildly, and at the same time, in his heart, he was madly complaining about the useless dog system. The charm of this man is really too obvious. Even an honest boy like Cedric is attracted by his beauty. So how do you protect yourself when you are alone outside? Just when Cole was in distress, Cedric scratched his head and broke the awkwardness. Let's not dwell on this issue for now. Let's go have breakfast first, and then I'll take you for a tour. The two of them got out of the passage and soon arrived at the Great Hall. The biggest advantage of being sorted into Hufflepuff was that it was closest to the cafeteria. At the same time, most of Hogwarts classrooms are on the ground floor, so going to class will save a lot of time compared to Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Carl followed Cedric along the way, but because of what happened in the morning, he deliberately kept a certain distance from him. Until they came to the auditorium for dinner. Carol no longer sat side by side with the other party, but sat opposite Cedric. Such an action undoubtedly made this honest and enthusiastic big boy very sad. So Cedric said embarrassedly, while stuffing his mouth full of food, don't be angry, Carol. I don't know why I acted like that, but isn't this a good thing? A beautiful face is what everyone dreams of. It would have been better if he hadn't said this, but saying it reminded Carl of that unpleasant scene. Good looks and attractiveness are, of course, good things, but you have to make sure you choose the wrong person. While Cole was complaining madly in his mind, he interrupted directly. In reality, don't mention it again, okay? It's embarrassing enough as it is. As he spoke, Carol took himself 2 pieces of bread, simply spread a little ketchup on them, and added 2 pieces of bacon and eggs. He made a simple sandwich. He really had no appetite today, especially when he saw Cedric standing beside him. The way he ate with relish made him even more suspicious that he might be bullied by his Hufflepuff classmates in the future because of his small appetite. Just as he was lamenting that there was a difference in appetite among Hufflepuffs, a parchment schedule appeared in front of him. First year wizards have a total of 8 courses, including potions, charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, history of magic, herbology, astronomy and flying. Astronomy and flight classes are held once a week, and the astronomy class is held in the evening. For the remaining 6 courses, most of them only have 2 to 3 classes per week, and each class lasts 50 minutes overall. It is very relaxing, with classes and holidays being half an half. This made Carl very happy, not only because he was happy that the course was not stressful, but more because the fact that the young wizards have so much free time means that there is a sufficient market for the games they conceive. You can easily empty the wallets of all your classmates, earn points for yourself, bring happiness to them, and you all have a bright future. After a while, the We're Light Twins also came to the hall. They looked around and soon found Karl and Cedric, and immediately rushed over aggressively. The two of them stood next to Karl, looking as if they were ready to eat someone. Mr. Karl Hohenzollern, you actually betrayed us. You actually sold out the knight you personally appointed. You are so mean. It's really sad. Facing the twins who were eager to accuse him, Karl behaved calmly, eating his sandwich like a gangster boss negotiating. Asked directly in a low voice, so, what compensation do you want, my dear mischievous knight? These words made the two Weasley brothers stunned on the spot. Can you look at me, and I look at you? Finally, George asked in confusion. You won't deny it? Just admit it like that. It was you who schemed against us. Of course, why should I deny it? Karl spread his hands. Such a successful prank without any consequences. It's enough to be recorded in the history of Hogwarts. Why should I deny it? I'm proud of it. Chapter 24, Hearthstone Project. No, this isn't right. The Weasley twins looked at Karl in disbelief. This wasn't right. The two of them came here today, thinking that Karl would feel guilty about his behavior at the very least. They will refuse to admit it, and use the truth as a threat, to force the other party to make some concessions and compromises. But now, Karl is lying on the ground with an attitude of, I did it. What can you do? The Weasley twins didn't know what to do for a moment. Karl, who had the initiative in speaking, began to use his best tactics. He started to pour the two people, saying in a misleading tone, actually, there's no need for you two to be angry. Every perfect prank plan requires someone to make sacrifices, but that doesn't mean the people who sacrificed themselves weren't great enough. You were also involved in this great prank. We have achieved an unprecedented effect, making the entire class of freshmen consider dropping out of school. Don't you think this prank is great? The resentment and anger in the hearts of the Weasley twins who were being poor were replaced by pride and honor in an instant. George asked tentatively, you mean we are also participants in this prank? Of course. Karl's face was a little serious. If you hadn't reminded me before, how could I have come up with such a perfect plan? You are the pioneers and leaders of this prank. You are like the guiding star in the Dark Knight, guiding me to make this plan. Your greatness needs no further explanation, and will remain forever in the memory of every Hogwarts student. In one sentence, the Weasley twins were placed on a pedestal. They looked at each other, their eyes starting to become brighter and brighter. Yes, if it weren't for the two of them giving Karl inspiration, how could he have come up with such a brilliant and perfect prank plan? They were the biggest contributors. In this light, being punished by Professor McGonagall meant nothing compared to that perfect prank. It was simply not worth mentioning. Seeing that his poor plan was successful, Karl immediately continued to ask, do you still resent me now? Of course not. You are indeed the prank king we have identified. Your Perfect Highness. Does being punished feel better? It's totally fine, sir. We are fine. The conversation between the three people made Cedric's eyes twitch wildly, and he looked at the two guys in disbelief. They are usually clever and mischievous, but under Karl's perfect acting skills and language skills, they are played like idiots. I was sold yesterday, so I have to thank him today. He looked at Carol dimly, at that handsome face that was full of charm in the eyes of all men. Suddenly, he shuddered all over. His judgment yesterday was correct. He must be sorted into Slytherin. It was really too evil. Just when he was worried about the future of his college. Karl touched the ring on his left little finger, took out two thick books from it, handed them over, and said to the Gemini, if you no longer resent me, I have a good project here, and I would like to invite you to participate. You are very popular among students, so I want you to promote the stories in these two books. If you come across someone who is interested, explain it to them in detail, and tell them that I have games that are more interesting than stories. The two books that Karl handed over were a collection of story settings about Azeroth that he had copied yesterday through his memories of his previous life. That is the famous world of Warcraft in his previous life. He wanted to use this story as an opportunity to create a magic card game like Hearthstone. This was the result of his careful consideration for an entire night. After all, based on his experience in his previous life, no game was as exciting as drawing cards, and by constantly drawing cards, you can help him quickly and empty the wallets of your classmates. The twins who took the 2 books no longer had the aggressive attitude they had before. Instead, he stared at Cole with a look that said, "You're really good at judging people," and said confidently, "Just leave it to us. We are well known among the students, but we are definitely the best. We'll do our best to promote you, but let me be frank. How will the remuneration be distributed?" Hearing the other party talking about remuneration, Carol's eyes rolled, pointed at Cedric beside him, and said lightly, "All 3 of us can choose, and we'll promote 1 person each, and ask them to sign their name on a piece of paper to show their willingness. If you participate in this game, I can pay you 1 gold galleon each, or." Before Karl finished speaking, the Weasley twins' eyes lit up, and Fred even grabbed Karl's right hand and spoke impatiently. "It's a deal." Having said that, you pulled George beside you and left happily. Looking at the backs of the 2 people, Karl sighed silently. It seems that the Weasley family's poverty curse does have great magic. Cedric, who was standing by, couldn't help but stroke his forehead with his hand, even though he had only been with Carol for 2 days, but he now knew very well that when Karl showed his bright and charming smile, it meant that this guy was going to cheat someone. So he first picked up the story collection on the table, and after briefly flipping through it, he was immediately attracted by the wonderful stories in it. The stories of humans, orcs, night elves, and dwarves had a fatal attraction to the wizard, and he immediately made a judgment. If you can make a game based on the stories in this book, you can definitely make a lot of money. He couldn't help swallowing, and looked at Carol and asked, "Or what? Aren't there 2 options?" Karl slowly turned his head and looked at Cedric. This guy was smart. He knew to check the quality of the goods first before asking the price. He liked smart people, so he spoke without any reservation. "Or I can give you 10% of the game's profits. Deal?" "Happy cooperation, boss." The moment Karl mentioned the 10% profit, Cedric, like the Weasley twins before him, said without hesitation that the deal was possible. Then, like the Weasley twins, he simply shook hands with Karl and ran away like the wind, as if he was afraid that the other party would regret it. Carol sat there with a dark face, looking at his right hand with an expression of disgust and disdain. "These 2 bastards. Why did they touch me when they just shook hands? It seems that my excessively high masculine charm is indeed a big problem." Just as he was lamenting that his beauty was already too heavy a sin, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. "I didn't expect to see you here, Mr. Hohenzollern. I thought you had made a lot of friends." Chapter 25 Miss Beaver Isolated. Such sour words made Karl turn his head quickly, wanting to see who it was. A little wizard who is attracted by his own sinful beauty, but cannot get it. But when he turned around, he couldn't help feeling a little disappointed, as Hermione had obviously dressed up carefully. "I don't know, when I was standing behind him." Carol turned his head away in disappointment without even a polite response. This made Hermione very angry. She slammed the plate on the table, sat directly opposite Karl, puffed up her face and spoke angrily. "How can you be so rude? And what's with that disappointed look in your eyes? Am I not so unpopular?" Karl, who was questioned by the girl, showed no panic at all and drank his coffee calmly. "What are you talking about, Miss Granger? I heard someone calling my last name, and I thought it was some new friend who didn't know me. You know, I have problems with communication barriers and I particularly desire friendship, but I never thought that it was in your heart. You never considered me a friend. You didn't even want to call me Karl." The sad eyes, the face blocked by the coffee cup, the disappointed handsome boy were perfectly portrayed by Karl. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been filled with guilt by now, but Hermione was obviously not an ordinary girl. She looked at Carol dimly with her bright eyes, and said unceremoniously with a cold snort, "Stop lying, Karl. There's no way you could have a communication problem after everything you did at the Hufflepuff table yesterday. I can see clearly that among this class of freshmen, there is one person who can make friends with everyone the fastest. It must be you, Mr. Hohenzollern. From this, it can be inferred that your previous actions in the carriage were all shameless deceptions. The girl mercilessly accused Karl of deception, and her voice was particularly loud, even though it was still early and there were not many people dining in the auditorium point, but it did attract a lot of people's attention. Cole was a little panicked. He didn't expect that this girl was so smart point, and he still holds a grudge. But who is he? He will never allow anyone to take the absolute initiative in communicating with him point. So he immediately changed his expression, stared at Hermione with a smile, and said nonchalantly, "You are a smart girl, and your deduction is basically correct, but you shouldn't be so angry at this time and abandon me, a shameless liar. But why do you want to sit at our Hufflepuff table again? It's not like there aren't students from your house sitting at the Gryffindor table, so I'll give you a brief explanation. Is there anyone who spent an entire night without making even one good friend?" Hermione's face turned red because of these words, and the knuckles of her hand holding the fork turned white from excessive force point. After a moment's silence, Hermione suddenly threw down the cutlery, put her hands on her hips and complained loudly, "They are unreasonable. Every time I took the initiative to talk to them about homework and magic courses, they were not interested in any of them. Many of them have not even turned a page in the textbooks they discuss. Most of them are about how to break school rules and those silly adventures. It's really unreasonable." The girl kept complaining about the ignorance and unruliness of her Gryffindor classmates, while Cal listened silently point looking at this angry little lion. I couldn't help but laugh. In fact, it is easy to understand for most of the students Hermione's hobby is really special. What other students' hobbies are reading and doing homework? She even memorized the textbooks before school started. The discussion of this topic did not cause Hermione to suffer from school bullying, which was considered to be a sufficient display of friendship and unity among Gryffindor students. But Cowl's smile immediately irritated Hermione, who was still furious. The girl put her hands on the table and leaned her head over almost face to face, staring at Carol intently. "Isn't this funny? Why are you laughing so happily?" Faced with the other party's close questioning, Karl did not back down, but stared at Hermione with his beautiful blue eyes. "No, it's not funny at all. I'm just happy that I have a friend to confide in." The red face and the faint white steam on her head reflect the girl's current condition. Karl's words were so hurtful that Hermione blushed with shame and sat back in her seat obediently. An ostrich buried its head and ate its breakfast silently. Karl sat opposite, drinking his coffee silently and complaining about the inhumanity of the dog system. "You are so beautiful, host. You have turned defeat into victory perfectly, making the girl who doubted you completely intoxicated by your beauty. Use your devilish language to play with their hearts." Villain points increase by 100. Current points 3100. "Shut up, you pervert. It's illegal to tease a lolly. I definitely don't have this hobby." As time passed, more and more students began to get up and come for breakfast, especially Hufflepuff House, which has the largest number of students. The long table was soon filled with students. Almost everyone was talking and laughing, except for Hermione, who was eating breakfast in silence with her head down. Most of the Hufflepuff students were enthusiastic and did not have much aversion to Hermione's arrival, but they did not have too much contact with her either. This hurt the girl very much. Karl, who was sitting opposite her, knew how much Hermione longed for friendship. I also know that the other party seems a little restrained because he suffered too many failures last night. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but just as he was about to take action, he felt someone pulling his clothes from behind, so he turned around to look. Then he saw the Iron Hat King Hannah standing timidly behind him. Her face flushed as she asked in a low voice, "Mr. Karl, do you know how to get to the History of Magic classroom? We are stuck with that strange staircase." Hearing this, Carol immediately looked back and found that there was a large group of freshmen following Hannah. Only then did he remember this should have been Cedric's job. He needed to guide the new students through the ever-changing staircases of Hogwarts to the classroom. But now That guy is busy helping me develop the gaming market, and after finishing, he needs to go to the trophy room to accept Professor McGonagall's punishment. The prefects of other grades have not arrived at the auditorium yet, perhaps because they have no classes, or for other reasons. Cole was a little overwhelmed for a moment. But soon he thought of a solution. He turned to look at Hermione, who looked a little lonely, and said to Hannah with a smile, "I'm sorry, Miss Hannah, I may not know the answer to this question either." "Oh, really? Then what should we do?" Hannah looked extremely lonely, and the freshman following behind her also looked a little anxious. Karl quickly waved his hand to calm everyone, then secretly pointed at Hermione across the table, and whispered in a low voice, "I think Miss Granger knows the answer to this question, but it might be more polite for you to ask her in person." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.